Hello, hello. Welcome to the live Q&A. Here we are once again. I'm Dr. Jared Jones, and I'll be taking some questions this evening. Live Q&A is a little bit different than what I do on the Sit and See series. In this series, I'm happy to answer basically whatever you'd like, as long as it has something to do with Buddhism, or sometimes if I know something about it, other Asian training systems like Taoism, etc., etc. So we can begin anytime. Glad to have you all here. I'm looking at the chat, except it's super far away because of how I'm set up. So let me pull it up on my phone. It'll be a little bit easier. Yeah. So some of you are coming straight over from the premiere. Hey, Sasa, welcome. Wombat, good evening. Jay, good to see you. Obama, good to have you. We have Barack Obama in the house once again. Ty, thanks for being here. And thanks for the super chat in the previous stream. Sweet and sour, good to see you. So let me get the comment section up on my phone. It'll be a little easier. Here we go. Nice. Okay. All right. So some fun announcements, some interesting announcements before I get going on questions, but you can start putting questions in the chat. Yes. Okay. Yes, Jay, I'll come to that question. So we are very likely, Neil Ripsky and I, very likely will have the first set of modules for Lohan up by midweek or so next week. I would say at the very latest, it'll be next weekend. And we decided, for those of you who are interested in having the energetic components and the physical components that go along with meditation from a Buddhist standpoint, right, without having to take empowerment, which is where you normally get these elements added onto your practice, Shaolin has these practices in a much more open form. And the particular stream of teachings that Neil Ripsky has in terms of his lineage has a little bit of the Tibetan understanding of these issues and a little bit of the Taoist understanding of these issues because of the way that the lineage came to him. So it's a very rich lineage of understanding and practice. He just sent me an email today with like 12 or 14 articles that he's written about the various elements of this practice, and I'm even myself extremely excited to get going on these practices for my own sake. So, if you're interested in adding on a physical or energetic practice in addition to your meditation practice to support your meditation training, I can't recommend this course that Neil is helping put together enough. I think it's going to be very, very much worth your time. Now, here's the exciting bit. You ready for this? So we're getting pretty close to deciding on what we think the price should be. Again, Neil teaches martial arts as a professional, so he is going to have to charge for it so he can survive. But a couple things that are interesting. One, Neil is going to has decided that the first 50 people that sign up will get 3 months at half price, which is pretty cool. So I think that's going to end up being about $19 per month for the first 3 months. So it's like the cost of a meal to get four lessons on Lohan stuff, one each week, right? So that'll be that. And then in addition to that, he's probably going to be leading group classes as well. Through the website that's being built, there's the ability to have group classes. So that's pretty cool. And then he's going to be teaching private lessons. So private lessons, I think, will be extra. But yeah. Anyways, so when you go to the Lohan website, you can sign up. You can tell us, what amount of money you think would be fair, and you're able to pay. And you can also just express your interest. So the first 50 people that get on that list for the pre-launch sign up will be able to have that 50% off for 3 months. So if this even vaguely sounds interesting to you, and you don't even know if you want to do it yet or not, to be able to do it for $19 a month for 3 months is a pretty good way to decide whether or not you want to do it. So I do have the link. If you scroll up, it's at the top of the chat for Lohan. Definitely check that out. I'm going to be plugging it throughout this stream because we're getting very close to launching it. Okay, now let me start taking questions. So the first question in the chat, since we have no super chat questions. Oh yeah, okay. Some of you may be new. This may be your first time on this stream with me. So the way this works is I teach everything for free. I do these live streams for free. I do my retreats for free. I do all my teaching for free. And anything that I have in a paid form, you can find somewhere else for free in exactly the same form. Okay? So everything I do is available at least somewhere for free. Having said this, I'm now doing this, roughly speaking, around 80 hours a week. So the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs. And I don't want to do anything else. I want to carry on doing this. But to do that, I have to hit certain numbers every month in terms of donations. Otherwise, I can't pay the bills and do everything else. And then I'll have to go do something else, and I really don't want to. I want to carry on doing this with you guys, making phone calls, talking to you about your practice, etc., etc. So since we're near the end of the month, we are unfortunately at crunch time. So whatever tonight you can send through in terms of donations, really important that some donations come through so that I can carry on doing this for another month. Since we're now here at the end of the month, I'm here once again holding out my hat. So if you're getting some value out of the stuff we do together, check out the GoFundMe or Venmo or PayPal. Obviously, they all have different amounts of fees they charge, so PayPal, Venmo would be the best way to go. Also, in terms of the chat, so because I can only do this when people donate, because I'm only able to do all this for free because people donate. Anybody that sends through a super chat, which is allowing me to do this for free for everybody else, I put their questions first. So if you'd like your question to come first in the answering order, then send through a super chat of $5 or more. Okay? All right, friends. Here we go. I'm going to start with the first question. So Wombat asks, can you talk about wandering retreat? Yes. So wandering retreat is a concept in both Tibetan Buddhist practice and Taoist practice. Not 100% sure about Theravadan practice, but basically you leave the environment you're comfortable in. You leave your home. Sometimes I think you even leave your monastery if you're wandering, and you'll go from place to place, cave to cave, monastery to monastery, temple to temple, house to house, and you don't stay anywhere for more than a few days. I think is part of the commitment for that practice. And while you're doing that, you're also doing some kind of intensive practice along the way. And there are still people that do this practice. Mingyur Rinpoche, I think, did that twice. And he's quite well known because they've done a lot of brain scans on his brain and stuff. And his brain is really extraordinary. He's, I think, 44, and the last time they scanned his brain, it looks like a 30-year-old or something like this. And yeah, I mean, all the things that are typical of great Tibetan yogis who they've done brain scans on are true of him. And as I said in the interview with Neil Ripsky on the first episode of the podcast, when you listen to him talk and stuff, he seems like a totally normal person. It doesn't look, from the outside, it doesn't look like anything's really different. This is what's so extraordinary about great practitioners. They can completely hide in plain sight. It's really incredible. Next, Jay asks, I was curious about your opinion on mala beads in meditation. How do you use them for progress? Okay, so mala beads are used mainly for counting mantras of some kind, or if you're doing prostrations, for example, you might count your prostrations, or if you were doing mandala offerings, you would count the mandala offerings. So it's just there to help you count. And then there are some practices where you're using it in a certain way, but I think mainly even when you're using it in a pretty specific way to do a certain practice, that The main thing you're doing with it is counting. So if you're doing, let's say, 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras for the Vajrasattva Nongdro, as you would do to prepare for Tibetan Tantra, as an example, then you're using the mala to help you keep track of, okay, well, if I did 10 rounds on the mala today, that's 1,000. So I'll need to do X number of additional days to get to 100,000. In reality, you need to do 100,000, 111,000. And just in case you screw up a few of them each time, you do 11 extra each time. So you do 111,000. Okay. DJ asks, yes, DJ, if you could resend the questions, I closed the Premiere down, so I don't have access to those questions at the moment. Oates asks, what do you think the best books to read that consider Buddhist concepts with a Western psychological cognitive science intersection? Honestly, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with that literature. So I mean, if you were to read my dissertation, I don't know if any of you caught the title of it in that brief moment on the premiere, but it is uh, theoretical and methodological uncertainties in modern scientific, or well, I can't remember now. Gosh, it's like 6 years ago. But anyways, it has to do with the fact that according to cognitive scientists, not me, although I agree. Hey Hans, welcome. So according to cognitive science, according to cognitive scientists, they're not quite sure how to define all of these elements that are involved in the meditating mind. And then on top of this, unfortunately, they've misdefined. They've defined poorly certain critical elements of the practice. And what happens when you do this is that then when you go to try to research what is it that makes that thing work, having not defined it properly, you end up with methodologies for research that have problems, right? So to give you one example, mindfulness in Buddhist psychology, which is where they got the term, means memory. Sati, smrti, means to remember, to recall, or to not forget. And what it refers to is two things. Mindfulness in Buddhist texts refers to the long-term recall of information, specifically things like the instructions for your meditation practice, and it means the active memory of not forgetting what you intended to do in the present moment. So, for example, if you're meditating on the breath, you need to actively remember, I told myself I was going to sit and monitor my breath, right? You have to actively remember this. And then on top of that, while you're doing that, you have to recall from previous things that have happened in the past. Oh, the instructions were, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and if this happens, I'm going to do that. So you have to be able to do long-term recall of the instructions, and you have to do active remembering of the present moment activity and not losing it. One geshe that I studied with in Charleston said, non-forgetfulness or mindfulness is defined as the active act of not forgetting what you intended to do, the active act of not forgetting what you intended to do, the active act of not forgetting what you intended to do. All of these, every single component of that sentence has meaning and definition. And if you don't define mindfulness properly and then you go to study it, you come up with research methodologies for studying it that don't make sense. So, for example, one of the things that I critiqued during my master's work was, because mindfulness is defined in Western psychological journals, largely there's dozens of definitions, but the most of them fit into this sort of flavor. The flavor is, how to say, the flavor is present moment non-judgmental awareness. Present moment non-judgmental awareness. moment by moment, how to say, moment by moment awareness without judging or getting involved with what has appeared. That's not mindfulness. That's not what mindfulness is. So, for example, think about this. This is a great example. Let's say a person is doing a mantra practice from Tantra, where they're visualizing I don't know, the syllables of a mantra inside their body, and the practice they're doing 16 hours a day while they're awake is visualizing the mantra turning inside some part of their body. Okay? They have to they have to be in the active act of not forgetting what they intended to do, which was all day long I'm going to visualize this mantra inside a particular part of my body spinning. Okay? That is the active act they are intending to do that they shouldn't be forgetting. On top of that, they have to remember all the instructions for that practice. They have to remember all of this information from the past to keep that practice working. Modern mindfulness, one of the studies for modern mindfulness, for example, has a criteria for measuring mindfulness, which asks, do you drop items throughout the day? In other words, do you become unaware of what you're doing physically with your body? Because isn't mindfulness moment by moment non-judgmental awareness of what you're doing? If it is, then dropping things would mean that you have less mindfulness, right? But that's not what mindfulness is. So a person who's doing a tantric visualization of a certain thing all day long might drop things more often because they're busy doing something else with their mind that they intended to do, right? Which is what mindfulness is. So hopefully maybe rant complete, but I love this research on the one hand because we get to sort of step over here and we get to look at all of these issues in meditation from a different perspective. Furthermore, we have learned things about meditation through studying it in this way that we wouldn't have learned otherwise, and we've also, I think, settled some debates from Buddhist psychology through basically studying it and finding out, well, what is it that actually happens when you train in meditation? What is it that doesn't happen, and can we quantify this? So there have been, I think, some questions we've been able to answer in a better way, in a more definitive way, using cognitive science. So I'm not anti-science, uh, and furthermore, it's really nice because it's, how in the world, as just meditators, would we ever answer the question of, will this help people with autism? Will this help people with ADHD? Will this help people with schizophrenia they've had for 20 years? I mean, as a normal, humble human being and not a weirdo, how would you answer those questions other than studying them in some sort of controlled setting, right? So I'm quite pleased in that way with the research. I'm also quite pleased with the research because some great yogis who have done between 19,000 and 44,000 hours of meditation in retreat have submitted themselves to being tested by cognitive scientists. And so we now are starting to learn what does the realized mind look like from a scientific perspective. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive, to have access to some real proof that the great yogi's mind is totally different than an ordinary person's mind. What a great time to be alive. You don't just have to take the Buddha's word for it, especially because they don't look that different than other people, generally speaking. See what I mean? I think it's quite wonderful in that way. So this is why I'm interested in it. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a good book that brings these two things together because they tend to focus too much on the cognitive science, and the definitions for things in the cognitive scientific literature frankly just aren't crisp enough from my perspective as a super Buddhist psychology nerd. They just haven't done a very good job of mapping out all of the components involved in meditation. And because of that, they could have used the Buddhist psychological model, for example, or the Yoga Sutras model of what the mind is and what the components of meditation are. They could have used the established models, but they didn't. They just made shit up. They just made their own shit up. And they ignored like a couple thousand years of scholarship and debate on these issues and started over. Again, maybe there's some merit to doing it that way, but man, is there some downside. Right. All right. For those of you who are new, since I've been ranting now for 20 minutes, some of you are definitely new. Super chats get answered first because everything I do is only possible because of donations. So to reward those people, since I owe them something and since the community owes them something, I put super chat questions first, as long as it's $5 or above. And then the um, the other thing is, I survive entirely on donations. As I said, I do this around 80 hours a week, and this is what I want to do. I want to help people with all this stuff, but I don't charge for anything. So, it's up to the community if you find value in it to chip in so that I can carry on doing it. That's basically the bottom line. Um, I'm going to go through the questions until I either run out of time for the night or pass out on camera. So I will get to you. I will get to you, but I'm going to go in the order of the chat. Okay? So do hang in there. If you've asked a question, I will get to it unless it gets just absolutely too late. Okay. Lang, I'd like to ask you about the power of mantra. I read in some sutras they can be very powerful. Then I hear it's exaggerated. Okay. So we don't have very good scientific evidence on this yet. So here's what I'll say. They've only done, as far as I know at this stage, they've done some research into the mantra associated with transcendental meditation, and they found that it is quite effective at basically helping with a number of different psychological issues, as long as you're, again, well, all of the caveats from the premiere, bear those in mind. They've also done some study on the Manjushri mantra, Akatsana. Oh, come on, Jared. You must know this mantra. I'm sorry, I can't proceed until I have it. Arapatsanana. Arapatsanadi. Omarapatsanadi. That's right. Omarapatsanadi. Omarapatsanadi. Yes. Okay. So the Manjushri mantra has some tests done on it, and the Manjushri mantra claims for itself the ability to make you more intelligent. And so this is a testable claim, right? Will it actually increase your intelligence in any measurable way? And so they've done experiments on this, people reciting this mantra, and I won't go into all the details, but in brief, they tested people before, they had them do a bunch of this mantra, and they tested them after, and they were smarter. They had gained IQ points by simply reciting Om Rapatsanadi a number of times. So, yeah, there is definitely something to the use of mantra. Furthermore, I don't want to say too much about this, but I've done a fair amount of use of mantra, and each mantra has its own flavor. Each mantra definitely has a feeling to it and does different stuff to you. And you have to do a lot of it for it to do that to you. You can't just do a few of them, you have to do thousands. But they definitely do have different feelings to them. They definitely do change you in different ways. They're not all doing the same thing. And how exactly I would quantify that, I don't know, but they're definitely a real thing. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Why am I interested in Western psychology, psychiatry? Okay, so I explained this in the video, in the premiere. Buddhist psychology is a wellness psychology. If you fall outside the range of normal, your mind will be too disturbed to do the things that are required for you to progress along the path with any kind of consistency. So, first, you have to get yourself, if you're out of the range of normal, back into the range of normal so that you can start working on these things that over a long period of time will take you down the path. If your mind is so unstable because you are suffering from schizophrenia, or because you have bipolar, or because you have ADHD, or because your life's falling apart with PTSD, then uh, you need to do more conventional stuff that is known to work based upon quantitative data to bring you back into a more functional, normal condition. And yes, normal from a Buddhist perspective is pretty dysfunctional, but you need to be within the normal range of dysfunction, not in the abnormal spectrum. If what you have is too debilitating, you just can't get to the point where you're doing enough consistently that you're going to make very much progress at all. So why am I so interested in Western psychotherapy and psychology and the medications and things that they offer? Because it works, and we can prove that it works. We can prove that for a huge number of people, it can bring you back into basically a normal level of kind of function for your life. And if you do this, well, now you have an opportunity to start working on wellness psychology, taking yourself from the low end of human function, potentially, if you're just recovered from something of related to abnormal psychology, and take you all the way across now to you're at the high end. You're much more functional than most people. And then if you become a great yogi, all the way over here onto the new bell curve for yogis, which is like its own little bell curve over here somewhere of hyper functional. Like you're exceedingly well by measurable standards. So that's why I'm so interested in it. There's not a lot of really good marriage counseling advice in the Buddhist canon. There's not a lot of really good business management advice in the Buddhist canon. There is some, but there's a whole bunch of conventional stuff you need to get conventional help with if you're living in the real world. And it would behoove you, if you want to be a business person, to have a business mentor. It would behoove you, if you have marriage problems, to go to a marriage counselor. It would behoove you, if you, I don't know, if you have deep family issues, to go to a family counselor. If you handle the normal stuff in your life in a relatively conventional way so that it becomes conventionally better and goes from being conventionally dysfunctional to conventionally not dysfunctional, now you have more time, more bandwidth, less emotional less chaos, as I sometimes just say. There's less chaos in your life. Since there's less chaos, now you have the chance to use that extra time, emotional energy, etc., to actually walk down the rest of the path, which is a long process and it requires consistency and effort. And if your life is taken up by all the chaos and uncertainty of an abnormal or dysfunctional situation, internally or externally, use normal means to get over it so that you can start doing all this stuff that's worth doing, right? So this is why I'm interested in it. Okay. What do I think of the scientific study of measuring Nirodha? I don't know that we've done any meditation studies on people who by Buddhist measures have attained nirvana. I haven't seen any such studies. I'd be really interested to see the results of them if somebody did such a study. Jay asks, do you ever give Dharma talks or studies with students? I'd love to study Dharma with you somehow. So Jay, I do actually have a series called Stages of the Path. So I'm very slowly going through the middle length, the Pamong Rinpoche's commentary on the middle length Lam Rim, and making videos on those. And yeah, there is a little group. There's a little group of like a little chat group that I have on Facebook that's dedicated to that. So if you wanted to get into that, I'd be happy to get you into it. Although I would say I'd highly recommend that you go through the training for the 5 foundations first. The reason for this is the Lam Rim and the stages of the path are like, I don't know, 90% rumination meditations. So if you want to get the absolute most out of all of the ruminations on the stages of the path, it would behoove you, it would be good if you had the ability to do concentration and if you had the ability to do rumination. Does that make sense? So you're very welcome to follow that series along. You're very welcome to join the chat group. Soma says we've upgraded the camera. That's true. It's 4K, and I traded in the one that was too smart. It was so smart. It was doing stupid things. So I got a dumber camera that was also 4K. DJ says there is wandering practice in Theravada. I suspected there would be because they have Theravada has what is it, the 8 austerities, and so there are additional austerities you can take on if you want to, but you don't have to. Okay. Yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, I figured there was one. I didn't know the name. I figured there was a wandering practice. Volume is too low. Okay. Oh, you're probably right because I'm on a different mic. Okay, I've just cranked the volume a bit. Let me see. Yeah, that should be a little bit better. Okay. Sorry you missed the memo, Hans. I set it up, I thought, so that the previous stream would kick people right over to this one when it got done, but I suppose it didn't. My apologies. Positive mindset says Jesus loves me. I have a fairly good relationship with Jesus, I think. I won't say which one, but one of my teachers, I've mentioned this before, who's a highly accomplished Tibetan practitioner, says that in Europe Jesus is a protector deity. So if you're doing certain kinds of practices, you can rely on Jesus as a protector deity. So I don't mind Jesus at all. And I'm pretty sure he does love me. And if you'd like help to make your Christian practice more profound, and I can do anything at all to make your Christian practice even stronger, I'm more than happy to do so. Jay asks, what do you think? Oh, look at this. We've got a once returner. A once returner. See? Amazing. Amazing. Just by hearing. Once returner. All right. Jay asks, what do you think about John Verviki's? I don't know. I don't know that person's work, unfortunately. Yeah, Buddhists do debate about the definitions for their own terms. This is true, but the range of debate is tighter, and the number of terms being used are more comprehensive of the process than you have in the Western canon so far. My argument would be just pick one. Just pick any one of these already accepted, highly sophisticated, highly detailed, highly, extremely comprehensive models of all of the moving parts of meditation as described by the Theravadins or by the Tibetans in one of the schools or by the Yoga Sutras or whoever. Just pick one, right? And maybe if you're studying Tibetan meditation, use the Tibetan one. Well, maybe if you're studying Theravada meditation, use the Theravada. If you're studying Yoga Sutra meditation, maybe use the Yoga Sutra one, right? For goodness sake, like you have these extremely sophisticated systems you're not using that you could be using that would be incredibly beneficial to the scientific process, in my somewhat humble opinion, after spending a year researching all of this. Hans asks about upgrading the setup. So there's only a couple things left to do. This mic has problems. No matter how many times I adjust it, no matter how many times I try to make it a little bit better, it still ends up not quite having the quality that I'd like. So I need to get a mic that's a little bit better than this. And then also I need to get a desk. I need to have a desk where I can set everything up and have a place to do my work and so forth. At the moment, I'm either on the couch or on the bed doing my work. And I'm not sure how long my wife's going to stay with me if this carries on that way. No, I'm joking. But no, it'd be good if I had somewhere to actually set up. And then this stream, for example, would be happening from there on the desk with everything set up rather than having to set it up and break it down every single time. So getting close now. I think there's probably in the ballpark of like 200, 300 pounds worth of stuff I still need to do. But other than that, camera's in good shape, has a nice stand, laptop's good. I think the new headset works well. So I appreciate the money that's come in. And like I said, I've taken very, very, very little of the donations that have come in and used them for anything personal. The vast majority has all gone towards upgrading the setup, which is why it looks and sounds the way that it does now. DJ says he likes that scientific research shows Buddhism is scientific. Yeah, some of it is. There's a huge amount of it that's not, and I'm okay with that, but some of it is, yeah. Some of it's provable, which I also like. Brad asks if I've done any Vipassana retreats. I have. I actually started out at Spirit Rock, was my first retreat ever. And I did a mindfulness retreat in the Thai forest tradition. That was my first retreat ever. And then I got into basically Tibetan practices, and I've stuck with that up to now. Sorry, just adjusting the mic a bit. Have I visited India? I haven't, but I'd really like to. Man, yeah, if anybody would like to help put together and sponsor like a pilgrimage trip through India, I think at the moment there are a couple things going on that would make it difficult to travel there at the moment, but in a year or two, man, I would really, really love to go do the major sites. Somewhere the Buddha said that every layperson should, at some point in their life, visit the major holy sites of the Buddha's life, and I'd very much like to do that before I die. Who's scared of soy? Who's scared of soy? A lot of people are scared of soy. Who's scared of soy? So soy says Buddhism isn't a religion. Start there. Buddhism is definitely a religion. Buddhism says birth is not the beginning, death is not the end. There's a force called karma that's attached to your non-physical mind stream that will determine whether or not you're born in heavenly realms, spirit realms, hell realms, or a host of other non-physical places that aren't located in the physical universe as we understand it. There are gods running around doing all sorts of things. There are deities of all kinds, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. There are spirits. There are, for goodness sake, this is religion. Let's not say this is just philosophy. This is religion. Buddhism does all the stuff that religion does. Of course, if you've ever taken a 101 class in religious studies, you know that this term religion is basically an undefinable term. But unless we're saying that you have to have a creator god for a religion to be a religion, Buddhism has everything that you would expect of a religion: an afterlife, an ultimate place that everyone ends up. The Buddhism says there are infinite celestial Buddhas watching over all beings. This isn't religion. Buddhism says that the Buddha was born out of his mother's side miraculously after descending from Tushita heaven, after he selected his mother's womb with the help of other heavenly beings. This isn't religion. This is religion. Let's just be comfortable with the fact that it's religion. Here's what I say. Look, secularists, my dear friends, if you happen to stumble across this stream, here's what you need to say. I don't accept those things. That's what you say. Those things are in Buddhism, but I don't accept them as a secular Buddhist. Stop saying these things aren't in Buddhism. Stop saying Buddhism isn't a religion. Stop saying Buddhism is just science from the East. Stop saying Buddhism is just psychology. All of those are lies, and they're actually really bad lies. You don't have to scratch the surface very hard of any of the texts of Buddhism to find out that is a vicious, terrible, ridiculous idea. I'm a professional Buddhist academic. I don't know a single academic from anywhere on earth that believes anything like that. Buddhism is a religion. The texts say all sorts of stuff that you would expect of a religion. They're filled with miracles, they're filled with gods, they're filled with deities, they're filled with unverifiable non-physical things. If we don't call that religion, you tell me what we should call it. And don't tell me it's philosophy, because for heaven's sake, that's not philosophy. Those are metaphysical religious claims. And we have all of our work ahead of us in trying to prove those claims are accurate in some sort of way, right? But you can't ever get to proving those claims are legitimate in any sense by simply ignoring them or saying they're all analogies. The Buddha knows very well what an analogy is. He uses a lot of analogies. And there's a lot of stuff he says that isn't analogy. You'd have to throw out, I think, I've never done the math entirely because there are just something like 30,000 or 25,000 primary texts in Buddhism. But I think about half of them contain literal statements about rebirth, realms of rebirth, karma. I mean, the 12 links include rebirth. The Four Noble Truths include rebirth, include suffering across realms. The Buddha didn't promise to make your life slightly better. The Buddha promised to put an end to old age, sickness, and death. So if you think that what he meant was when you die, you turn into dirt, that was something that was already true. If he's just a philosopher who's a materialist and doing psychology, we're all going to die and turn into dirt if we have no mind that carries on after death. So if you think the Buddha's promise is fulfilled simply because we all die, I think you've missed something pretty important about what the Buddha's teaching. I digress. Next. Oh, Brett B. Coolin is back. Brett B. Coolin. Thoughts on I'm not sure what the A stands for, but I'm assuming CT is cognitive therapy. Bringing Eastern thought into psychology, says Dada Daddy. Fantastic name, by the way. I like it. I like it. I see, unlike some people who criticize or talk about these things in the way that I do, I actually like meditation apps. I like some of the stuff that's going on with modern meditation. I like the incorporation of Buddhist principles, sans Buddhism, into Western psychology, because a lot of this stuff is universal. And there's a lot of stuff you can do that can take you from, let's say, this end of the ordinary to like over here. It's not going to take you to enlightenment. That's way over here. But there's like a few things you could do that would take you from the bottom end of normal to the middle or to the top of normal. And those things could be done probably without becoming a religious Buddhist. But the Buddha's promise was not to make you slightly less neurotic and have a slightly better life. His promise was to put an end to old age, sickness, and death. So I think you're missing out on something if you were, for example, training in Buddhism and didn't want to take on the rest of it. You don't have to take it on today. Sometimes I say if you don't understand something in Buddhism and you want to go down the Buddhist path and a bunch of it sounds weird and mythological to you, just put it on the shelf. Don't say yes, don't say no. Just anything you don't get, study it well and put it on the shelf. Oh, acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm not familiar, but if it's coming over from Buddhist psychology, again, I like these efforts. I just think they probably don't lead to the same place as what the great yogis are accomplishing, and the data that I've seen indicates that that's true. Indicates that the great meditators who aren't part of an actual lineage of something aren't attaining the same results as the great yogis. DJ says, Western psychology works for humans caught in an endless delusion. For instance, it requires that the delusions of a self, getting to normal, could be believing in a self. Doesn't that contradict the Dharma? Yeah, no. Here's the thing. Right now, even as a Buddhist, even if you completely believe in selflessness and you accept it 100%, you still believe in a self. Because that's preconceptual. Most of the work you're going to do on the path, you have to do in the context of delusion. As a Buddhist who accepts all this stuff that the Buddha says is true, or that your teachers say are true, or that you've studied and decided is true. So you have to get from an abnormal condition back to a relatively normal condition, and walk the path for a long time in a state of delusion. According to the Mahayana system that I belong to, for example, there's, how do I put this? The only perception you have as an ordinary being that doesn't include ignorance, this cognitive error of misperceiving things, the only one you can have as an ordinary being that doesn't have that, unless you use Tantra, and Tantra allows you to generate very subtle states of awareness. The only state of mind that doesn't have ignorance in it is your direct perception of selflessness. Every other state of mind you generate at every other level of the path includes the wrong view of self, because it's preconceptual. It happens at the level of perception, not at the level of ideas or beliefs. Ideas or beliefs are like way up here in terms of where they're living, right? But perception is sort of, how to say, is like the baseline level of experience before you've done too much with concept. Although even with perception, by the time you sort of have the experience, you've mixed a lot of concepts into perception. And you can learn that by training in meditation. And I think cognitive science says the same thing. Have I heard of Osho, says Hut 4939. I have. What do you think? Do his teachings differ from the Buddha's? I haven't studied Osho in any great detail, although I tend to think based upon the documentary that was made, what was it, Wild Country? And I tend to think based upon certain decisions and behaviors there, and based upon what I can see of those teachings, that it's not Buddhist stuff. It's Osho stuff, which is fine. Maybe it helps some people. I don't know. It's not really my area. If somebody was asking me, what do I think? Should I go with Osho, or should I go with, I don't know, the Kagyu tradition or Thai forest? I would recommend something else. you know, I just don't know what's going on there. DJ recommends a book. Okay, thank you. Zhao Quen says, I'm new to Buddhism. I was wondering what the standard view of a practitioner to the canon is. Is it akin to Christian infallibility? No, actually. So the canon is huge. It has, again, I think if you were to make a Buddhist Bible, it would have something like 30,000 chapters. There's just a huge body of literature that is the primary layer, the first layer of the teachings. I mean, it's absolutely mind-bogglingly huge, this first layer. And the Buddha, according to our canon, taught different things to different people who had different capacities. So not every teaching agrees with every other teaching. And according to us, this is by design. And so if you're going to accept certain teachings, you will end up rejecting other teachings by necessity. So you can't say that all of it is infallible in the sense that all of it is absolutely true for everyone all the time. What you can say is that for certain people who have certain predispositions, who have certain needs, that certain teachings are true and beneficial for those people. It's not anything goes. Anything doesn't work for anyone, right? It's not that kind of thing. But there are different teachings that function better for different groups of people, and the Buddha gave those in very strong form to different people. Now, of course, when I, as a Mahayana practitioner, for example, read the Theravada sources, and sometimes, I mean, like a week ago or something, I had a long conversation with a Theravada practitioner about certain seemingly definitive statements in the Pali Canon about the limits of various things in terms of practice or whatever. Wild, Wild Country. Yeah, that's the name of the documentary about Osho and his early community. Um, so when I had a conversation with this Theravadan practitioner, you can create a very solid case for the sort of Theravadan worldview. But if I look at those same sources through a Mahayana lens, what I read when I read those same sources is something different than what the Theravadan practitioner reads. I see different stuff. So, one small example is the Buddha says, "This is my last birth." And this person I was talking to, for example, made a big deal of, well, if he's saying this is his last birth, and the Buddha can't lie, then don't we have to say that the Buddha entered into final nirvana and he's no longer available? And I said, no, we don't. Why? Because if you break the 12 links of interdependence, that will be your last birth of the type that we're referring to in terms of samsaric rebirth. So the Buddha is not lying if he says this to somebody and they take away that the goal is nirvana. And someone like me who reads it can go, oh, yes, he's attained non abiding nirvana. He'll never have a birth again of the kind that we're discussing in this context. And now he's going to carry on to non abiding nirvana and ultimate Buddhahood. And even more sophisticated than this, I would argue that the the Buddha was already enlightened when he appeared in the world, and so much of what he did was an appearance for our benefit. But that's a long conversation. So no, you don't have to accept the whole canon. In a way, you can't accept the whole canon. You have to take an approach to the canon and then decide based on that approach what you're going to keep and what you're not going to keep. And so, yeah, it's sort of like a whole set of stuff that allows you to develop yourself as a discerning mind. There are certain things that are common to the whole canon, and those are basically accepted by everybody. Karma, rebirth, realms of rebirth, the existence of Buddhas, the existence of nirvana, the existence of clairvoyant capabilities, the existence of gods and hells and spirits and all sorts of things. These are common to all the traditions. Much of the wisdom side of the path is common to all the traditions. In other words, selflessness and emptiness. Much of the having to do with metta and compassion and so forth are common, but the extent to which they're taught and trained is different. In the Theravada traditions, there's less emphasis on metta and compassion. And they're taught, from what I've seen, quite differently than how they're taught in Mahayana tradition. They're taught more like goodwill kind of practices. And in the Mahayana tradition, they're made extremely powerful, extremely forceful, overwhelmingly huge and powerful, because these are the minds that stop you from entering into abiding nirvana. And you need those minds to be extremely powerful. Otherwise, you will enter into abiding nirvana if you've already broken the 12 links. So, hopefully that helps. Scarf asks, is taking refuge in the Buddha's teachings a bad thing? For instance, when I may feel I need clarity rather than meditating, I sometimes feel instead consuming literature or watching videos is easier. I'm a little bit unclear in terms of what you mean. Uh, Nothing wrong with taking refuge. Nothing wrong with, reading things to try to get clarity on what's going on. It's a huge misunderstanding of Buddhist stuff in general that the only thing to do is meditate. Meditation is one of is if you're on the Theravada path, one of 8 things you need to do, including having right views, which is just having the right ideas about stuff, right? you gotta you need to have the right worldview based upon spending time thinking about things and analyzing things and coming to certain kinds of conclusions about how the world is. Jay is describing the book a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I tend to like the language of meaning and purpose. I spent a lot of time talking with one of my mentors about meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose are a really interesting way of talking about what Buddhist training does in terms of your psychology. You could say bliss, for example, and that, it has some value. But actually, what happens is that you start having meaning and purpose. That's what bliss is like. Bliss is not just feeling good. It's that the mind is perfectly functional in the circumstance for the sake of self and for the sake of other, primarily for the sake of other. And implicit in this, naturally, there is self-meaning, self-purpose within the act that you perform from moment to moment, based upon taking the entirety of this circumstance into consideration as you perform the act. So, a state of a realized mind is one of profound meaning and profound purpose in every moment, in every act. And there isn't some second thing that needs to be done in order for meaning and purpose to arise. Meaning and purpose is part of the activity of mind. Yeah, my teacher went so far as to say it's innate to the mind. You just haven't noticed. Yeah, I mean, there may be something to that, Jay. Um, I don't know. I think if I were to buy one more book at this point, the bookshelf behind me would collapse in protest. I need to study the books I've already bought. I literally you can't see them, but I'm staring at a stack of books here. There's 4 of them that I need to read that I have out, and then there's 2 of them on that table behind me that I have out to read that I haven't read and should be reading. Okay. DJ says samsara is meaningless. Meditation is to escape samsara. There's no other place to be, my friend. Samsara is just you with delusions and karma and ignorance. Nirvana, non-abiding nirvana, is you here with exactly the same thing happening, but without that. So the meaning is right here. The meaning is already here. There's no samsara out there that's utterly separate from you. So if you think it's all meaningless, you're saying that you're meaningless, which is not true. You can't pull yourself apart from the whole circumstance. And when you remove delusion and karma and ignorance, then the whole circumstance has meaning and purpose. So you got to be a bit careful about how you frame these things. The problem is you. The problem isn't the outside world. The problem is your mind, not the outside world. It's not like the world out there is meaningless and it's all bad stuff. It's that your mind is screwed up. So you don't know how to you don't know how to access meaning and purpose in every single moment, every single action, every single circumstance. The problem is us, not the world. Hans asks where I live. I'm living in the UK. I live in Edinburgh, Scotland, the city of Harry Potter, the city of Hume, the city of the ancient fraternity of Freemasonry. This is the capital of Freemasonry for Scotland, for the Scottish Order. All sorts of interesting things in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is such a historic city. There's so many interesting odds and ends here. Thoughts on Stan Groff? Not familiar. Sorry, Daddy. David. I'm Kane, Chinese dragon. Buddha is born Mandarin Chinese Mayan Messiah. Wow. The more you know. The more you know. I've been informed. Jonathan, do you know much about the Nath tradition? I was listening to some talks with a Nath who seemed to hold the Buddha was a real ultimate basis of Vedic tradition, which were corruptions. Oh, wow. That's an interesting idea. I don't think there's a good historical basis for that, but no, I'm not familiar with the Nath traditions, unfortunately. Sorry, I wish I could be more helpful. Right, just making my way through. Okay. Vincent. Hector the Hector Vincent. Please keep Osho and J. Krishnamurti and all neo hippies away from Buddhism. Total frauds. You know, I've read to some level of detail. To some level of detail, I've looked at Krishnamurti's work, and he's basically teaching an extremely stripped down version of just sitting, non doing, self observation practice, which is not a bad practice. It's a pretty profound practice. You know, I can't say for sure whether or not people are gaining great accomplishment in his system. I don't have any reason to say they aren't, and I don't have any reason to say they are. Um, but the technique that he's teaching, if people were to do that very intensively, I think he discouraged, or at least didn't do very much or teach very much, sort of sitting and doing this as a formal practice, that it was an all day thing that you just did all the time. I don't know that I agree with that approach. I think you need some other skills. You need to do some other stuff. But again, I'm not super familiar with his work and the whole set of techniques that he taught beyond what I just mentioned. Okay, Scarf asks, is it any real way possible for a layman to achieve nirvana in the realm of normal society? Yes, it is. There are great examples from the Buddhist canon. I would point to Vimalakirti, for example. I would point to the Indian Mahasiddha tradition, where a lot of those are lay people. A lot of those people were living in the real world. Some of them working extremely worldly jobs. Like one of them was the attendant of a prostitute, who also ground sesame seeds to make sesame oil, which was apparently considered to be a very lowly job. Another was a king. There have been all sorts of people throughout Buddhist history who have attained great realization. And from a tantric perspective in particular, if you were to realize emptiness even once directly using the subtlest layer of your consciousness called clear light or rigpa, if you were to do this just once to realize the selflessness or emptiness of that subtlest mind, you would attain nirvana immediately. That's how powerful it is when you do it at that level of consciousness. So this is absolutely astonishing, right? You can kind of jump the whole line and head straight for nirvana. And yeah, you don't have to be living as a monk to do that. You don't have to be living in a cave to do that. That's something that you can potentially accomplish with sincere practice over a long period of time in real life, combined with some intensive periods of retreat throughout the course of your life. So, yeah, it is possible. So, talking about Sadhguru and Osho in the chat. I don't dislike Sadhguru. Again, he has a uh, pretty big business, and I know through the grapevine, I know some people that are close to him who've been close to him for a while, and they don't have much bad to say about him. Like the worst things that I've heard about him aren't that bad from people who have been close to him for a long time. You know, relatively speaking. uh, and the thing is, the techniques that he teaches, from what I can tell, are techniques that you find elsewhere that are very effective and actually do stuff. Like he has the shunya practice, which is basically just sitting, shikantaza zazen style practice, so doing non-doing, which is very effective. It's an extremely profound and effective practice, and this is one of the primary things that he teaches, along with many other things that, as far as I can tell, are legitimate things like Kundalini yoga, etc., etc. So I don't have any problem in principle with what he's doing or teaching. And just because somebody's made money by doing what they're doing doesn't mean that they're illegitimate. You know, I mean, a lot of the Tibetan lamas inherit hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. They inherit whole monasteries. They inherit the wealth of their previous person and the entire estate of that person, which could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. In Japan, a lot of the monasteries and temples are now owned by families. They pass from father to son or from whatever. They pass by hereditary means through a family, and some of them may be worth, again, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. It doesn't mean these people aren't legitimate. There's a certain amount of money that's involved in running anything. I mean, unless you're living as a yogi in a cave and your students come there with like meager provisions and hang out with you and do practice, which also still happens today, most of the stuff that we have to do takes money. It's just how it is. So, uh, just because an organization's making money or doing well or is popular doesn't mean it's illegitimate. Does Buddhism teach? Okay, so Siddhi, if you can translate these terms, I don't have time to translate all the terms on live. So if you'll translate them and put them in the chat, then I can comment on them if I know them. As I say sometimes, I studied mainly from the Tibetan perspective and only secondarily from the Sanskrit and Pali perspective, all of these terms. And so I sometimes need to see them in English or Tibetan before I know what they mean. All right, let's see. Abhishek, is there a mechanism of self-correction in Buddhist ethics like science? Will new info modify or reject or add things? Yes, there is. There is. In particular, in the Tibetan tradition, they have... DJ is jumping the chat with a super chat. Okay, DJ, I'll be right back. I'll be right to you after this question. So, in the Tibetan traditions that comes through Nalanda, so the high Indian Buddhist tradition, which passed through some of the great monasteries, they had a tradition of debate, and so they would do these formal debates where it was just whoever has the best idea wins. It wasn't simply scriptural authority. It was what interpretation of things is the best, right? Which interpretation of things can be logically defended and which can't, and on what grounds can it be logically defended. So this process of debate is what allows new information to enter and information that doesn't work to be phased out. And that this system of debate in the Tibetan canon, inherited by the Indian tradition of Buddhism, uh, which would have come straight through, right from the Buddha's time, through the monasteries established at the Buddha's time, et cetera, into the early Indian Buddhist tradition of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and that then extends up to the 14th century where it gets destroyed. Before it gets destroyed, it's inherited by the Tibetans. So Nalanda, for example, was at the time considered to be one of, if not the greatest intellectual haven on the entire planet. I've said this on live before, but the historians amongst the Muslims armies that invaded at that time and destroyed that monastery say that it took them 3 months to burn all the texts in the library because there were so many books in the library at Nalanda. And there are travel logs from people visiting from China. There's one in particular that's quite funny where a guy, I can't remember what he was studying. It was some relatively conventional topic, actually, I think, like architecture or something. And he came to the library at Nalanda Monastery, and he said, when I arrived at the monastery, in short order, I realized that the librarian, just the librarian, knew more about my subject than I had ever learned in my entire life. so the librarian was more of an expert just by being a librarian there in his subject area than he was. So think about this, right? So Buddhism has a long history of continuing to intellectually develop itself and bring in resources and study things and figure things out and take things on board and jettison things that don't work. And yeah, I mean, I think there's value to that process, and it continues today at the Tibetan monasteries. They now teach, in addition to all of the classics from the Buddhist canon, et cetera, they teach a full curriculum of normal topics, math, biology, science, et cetera. So, yeah. And the reason for this is because it's true. And you want to teach the monks stuff that's true, right? I mean, this is pretty important. Okay. So, what was this super chat? Isn't meaning a delusion? No, meaning is not a delusion. Meaning is perhaps the essence of practice. When you gain capability, when you gain any realization, it adds meaning to your perception of the world. If you gain compassion, for example, if you train in compassion and you develop some compassion, the fact that you now have the desire deeply in your bones to benefit all other sentient beings until there's no more suffering provides great meaning and purpose to the actions you take from moment to moment. Your actions feel meaningful and purposeful. Likewise, if you train in concentration and you gain some ability to see what perception is actually like, it's a bit difficult to describe, but there's a natural meaning in the fact that you've gotten the BS that's normally there out of the way. It's self-meaningful. You don't have to do a second thing for meaning to appear because the mind is satisfied with what's occurred. And there's an element of satisfaction in meaning, right? When you do things that are meaningful, you have a feeling of satisfaction about those things. So like this, if you even just gain some concentration so that you can see what's actually going on, right? Even before you've eliminated significant levels of the actual underlying problems that are associated with samsara, already you start having how to say, you start having the feeling that your life is meaningful. And that's important. It's very important. So someone in the chat asks if I'm a real person and not AI. It's just a really nice setup over here. So yeah, I'm a real person. Let me hold up a random object. Look, here's a random thing. And I can actually open it. Watch, look. And it has random stuff, randomly shaped things. And look, I have 5 fingers instead of like 14 that are intermingled with each other. Okay. Next. DJ, don't. Sorry. Yeah. So in terms of scientific study, send that to me on Discord or Facebook. The links are in the description because I'll lose it here in the chat. Scarf asks, "What is meditation?" Meditation is a highly stable, highly lucid, unbiased state of mind that doesn't add or subtract qualities from objects of perception, characterized by mental and physical suppleness. That's meditation. You're welcome. It's like meaningless bunch of meaningless words, right? So meditation is very misunderstood because this term meditation, first of all, I think comes over with some Christian roots and I don't know, maybe some Greek roots or something. And it basically just means thinking things through. And that's not what we mean by meditation. And then in a modern context, of course, meditation means everything from, I don't know, aromatherapy to sound baths to putting crystals on everywhere that's unmentionable. So that's not meditation according to the Buddhist canon. To say very little about all that, that's not what we're talking about in terms of meditation. Meditation in Buddhism basically has two flavors. The first flavor is training in concentration. The second flavor is training in analysis under the influence of concentration. So it's very practical. You need to be able to make your mind, remove all of the ordinary bias from your mind through making the mind way less conceptual than it is now. You need to make the mind extremely stable so that when you place it somewhere, it stays there and it doesn't jump off to all the normal biases and conclusions you would jump off to. Then you need to make it extremely bright and lucid so that whatever it's beholding or knowing or being aware of, it's extremely fresh in the way that it's cognizing that thing. It's not dull or sleepy or non-discerning, right? It's highly discerning. And then you need to be able to see what you're seeing there without adding qualities that don't exist through conceptual thought, nor taking qualities away that do exist, again, through conceptual thought. So you need a type of perception that is highly stable, highly lucid, unbiased, with a quality of resting on its object or holding its object without adding or subtracting qualities. And then also, to perfect that concentration, it needs to have what's called mental and physical suppleness associated with it, which is basically the ability, without getting into too many details, the ability to remain on that object for as long as you wish without any possibility of the mind becoming dull, becoming tired, without any possibility of the mind wavering to something else unless you want it to waver to somewhere else. Then you take this mind that's like an incredibly powerful telescope or incredibly powerful microscope, and then you start using it to analyze things. And that's the second kind of meditation. So once you have this extremely powerful instrument, you then start pointing it at things and analyzing how they exist. And then when you actually realize or recognize, oh, wow, this is how this thing exists, then you use that instrument once again to hold the conclusion. You see? So in brief, two kinds of meditation in Buddhism: stabilizing meditation or concentrated meditation and analytic meditation. And then you bring them together by using analytic meditation to come to conclusions about how things exist and then hold those conclusions with concentration. So that's called a union of shamatha and vipassana, a union of stabilizing meditation and analytic meditation. Right? So that's meditation in a nutshell. And every other type of meditation that exists in the Buddhist canon can be either described as a preparation for those or a subset of those. So you're either using one of those things to do something else, like if you focus on a mantra, concentrated meditation. If you're focusing on loving kindness, concentrated meditation. If you're using an analytical process to generate loving kindness, analytic meditation. And then you're holding the result of loving kindness when it occurs in your system as a subjective experience of loving kindness, concentrated meditation. You're analyzing selflessness, analytic meditation. You're holding the conclusion of that analysis when you've realized some things are in fact selfless, concentrated meditation. Then you do Tantra, you're meditating on the winds and channels, concentrated meditation. You're then analyzing some, I don't know, the whether or not the deity that you're visualizing is selfless or empty or whatever. Analytic meditation. You're then holding the conclusion of that, concentrated meditation. You see? So no matter where you turn, no matter how subtle, no matter how coarse, no matter how important, no matter how unimportant this aspect is, it's going to fall into one of these categories of analytic or concentrated or a combination of the two, or something that's preparing you to do that. So, for those of you who have done training with me for a while, the 5 foundations, as you can tell, you start with foundation 1. What is this? Get your mind to go where you want. Foundation 2, make the mind more calm. Foundation 2 and 3, make the mind more calm and take the practice off the cushion. Foundation 4, make the mind not only calm but extremely lucid and extremely aware of what's going on with itself in particular, because that's really helpful. Foundation 5, learn how to analyze using this now really powerful mind. So now you can analyze things and combine it with the concentrated power you've built up through the earlier steps and stages. So both of these practices are preparing you for stabilizing meditation and vipassana. So if you go into retreat, if you train more hardcore, blah, 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 both of these capabilities that you're developing through the system that I teach, you're preparing both of these sets of skills, the analytic side and the concentrated side, and you're actually learning how to bring them together when you do rumination meditation also. So you're practicing these skills while they're still sort of young, you could say. So that's meditation in a nutshell. All right. All right. Sorry, lost my place in the chat. Just chat amongst yourselves while I scroll through the infinite scroll, trying to find where in the ever-loving I've gone back too far. Things have gone terribly wrong on my end. Please have a tea, have a coffee. Right. Soma. The suttas make it clear the Buddha was not enlightened before he began teaching. No, they don't. The suttas make it clear that he appeared to not be enlightened before he began teaching. Whether or not he was actually enlightened before he began teaching is an open question. And it is a question that is subject to much debate and discussion. When I get stressed out, I feel it's wiser to give myself more perspective rather than trying to ruminate. I see. Yeah, you've got to work with yourself in a skillful way. And the more tools you develop, Scarf, like we were just talking about, the more tools you develop to work with yourself so that you can skillfully change whatever's going on in your mind to be more beneficial for yourself and others from moment to moment, or to make it through whatever is difficult that you're dealing with, do that. Along the way, there are going to be things that don't seem important now for your needs that nonetheless you need to train in so that by the time you get to the point where you need them, you have them in hand. So I'll give you an example. It seems really important to make a lot of money for most people because you have bills coming, doesn't it? Right? So hopefully all of you will agree Money is a motivating factor for you because you have to have it to live. Yeah. For quite a few of you, probably loneliness and wanting to have relationship with the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever you're into. You want companionship, both friendship and romantic relations, etc., etc., etc. So you have these things that seem very immediate that you want, and those tend to over and you need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to drink. Those immediate needs and immediate desires that are quite powerful seem to override very often whatever it is you need long term. Let me give you an example. You probably want good health when you get older, I'm assuming, right? You probably want good health so that when you're old, the body doesn't hurt and break down. But to have that good health, you need to eat really well right now. You need to sleep well right now. You need to exercise in a way that doesn't wear your body out as you get older, starting right now. But there's not much urgency to this because you're not old yet. And these other things that take up a lot of time, like work and romance and having nice experiences and stuff right now, seem to be more demanding. And so there's just not that much desire to get to these things that are long-term concerns, right? Like not getting lung cancer or not having knees that are worn out or whatever the case may be. And so we don't take care of these long-term things, and instead we do stuff right now, usually that leads to problems later on. So what you have to do as a person who's becoming more mature, and I don't know how old you are, Scarf, but we could all do with being a little bit more mature, and including myself. No matter, and I'm 40. As you mature your worldview, you have to take more and more responsibility for your future condition of yourself. And part of that responsibility is, from a Buddhist perspective, you're going to have a next life. From a Buddhist perspective, you've been stuck in samsara forever and you're trying to get out. From a Buddhist perspective, countless beings are waiting on you to become an enlightened being so that they can get out of samsara with your help. So there are like these pretty long-term, big picture projects that you're involved in as a Buddhist, and you've got to do the work for that. So you do need to do the meditation. You do need to train the mind. You do need to make that a priority. And even if you just want nicer stuff in this life, you've got to have a strong mind, a capable mind, and a strong heart, a capable heart, or the good things you want, even in this life, will be hard to get. For example, if you don't have the ability to endure pain and difficulty and loss and disappointment, how are you going to accomplish things of meaning and value, even in a conventional sense, in this life? How are you going to do that? Because everything involves some pain and difficulty and disappointment. If you don't have the willpower to say, I'm going to do this, and then actually carry it out with perseverance, how are you going to accomplish even conventional stuff in this life? You need willpower to even have the normal, conventional, good life you want to have. If you are filled with bitterness and hate and frustration and blah, 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 blah for half of humanity because you don't like liberals, or you don't like conservatives, or you don't like Christians, or you don't like Muslims, or you don't like blah, 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 whatever it is you think you don't like. Every time these negative emotions come up in you, you're the one that suffers. And eventually, they'll cause you to cause harm to others as well. So it's up to you. It's up to you whether you want to have a nice life or not. And it requires thinking it through and realizing that there's long-term stuff you have to do that doesn't give you much benefit right now, but you still have to do it anyway. Otherwise, you don't get the benefit at the end of the day, at the end of the road. Yeah. So it is okay to work with yourself and just do what you can. Do what you can. uh, if you're limited in some ways, that's fine. Just do what you can do, and that's, you got to work with yourself. At the same time, think these things through so that you're doing enough of the stuff that's of long-term benefit, that by the time you get to the long term, you have those benefits. Okay, next question. Since we've come to the next sort of 30-minute mark, my friends, I've got to do my brief commercial announcement, as I am wont to do. So quite a few of you are new to this stream, so you don't know all the odds and ends. I'm a Buddhist academic who's also spent 20 years training as a proper full-on Buddhist, and also another 6 training in Taoism. So I'm actually here trying to help people understand Buddhism, and to help people train in meditation, in particular train in all of this stuff in real life, not necessarily in retreat. There's plenty of resources to help you train in retreat from various lineages. There's way fewer resources to help you train in real life. So that's primarily what I'm doing, is giving people the intellectual tools to defend themselves from the various challenges of the modern world as Buddhists on the one hand, and on the other, training everyone who's interested from anywhere in any tradition in basically highly effective forms of meditation that will increase the benefit of whatever practices you're doing. I think in any tradition, whether it's Eastern Orthodox or it's Oats, you can put that up. That's fine. Whether it's Eastern Orthodox or it's, as a matter of fact, Oats, put up the other 2 links as well. So I have a student who's Eastern Orthodox who tells me that the things that I've trained him in terms of meditation have made him better at his Eastern Orthodox practice. I have a Jewish student who is very pleased with the outcomes of of her meditation practice as a Jewish person, and she's primarily sort of like a Jewish secularist. I have a new student, or a gentleman who's becoming a student, I suppose, who's in the Sikh tradition. And it's because these skills of training your mind and gaining access to what your mind is and the components that make you up, these are universal. We're all human. So these things are just things that we all have access to. And because I've put a lot of time and effort into packaging some things together that are really effective if you're living in the real world, I think this has the potential to benefit anybody that wants to train in meditation in any system. And because I've trained in a lot of different stuff and a lot of systems, I have a lot of tools that I've packaged together that are helping prepare you for other stuff that I'm not even telling you that I'm preparing you for through the systems that I'm training you in. I'll just give you one example. So, for example, if one day that you want to get involved in Qigong, for example, let's say you want to do Qigong, you want to go way down the rabbit hole on Qigong, the first thing you need is extremely good body awareness. Extremely good body awareness. Tactile sensation is the gateway to Qi and being able to move Qi around the body, etc. You want to do Tantra? The Tantras involve a high degree of awareness of the body and a number of other things. Some of those things are baked into the system that I'm teaching. You want to do Taoist practice in Neidan? Neidan primarily depends upon you having extremely good awareness of your body. But also, you need to be able to do types of meditation which are non-doing types of meditation, which are baked into my system. You want to do mantra practice where you turn the mind inwards and then you slow down the mantra and then you turn to consciousness? That's baked into my system. I don't teach you mantra, but I teach you how to become aware of consciousness and the contents of consciousness, which is the sort of relationship you need to be able to do internal mantra recitation really well. So all of these incredibly profound practices from different systems from all over the world are all supported and benefited by the techniques I've packaged together. And I've done this on purpose because I want everyone to be successful in this stuff, because it makes everything better. Everything else will be better for everyone if you may become successful in these practices. So there are 2 things that I don't teach in any great detail. I don't teach the energetic part of all of this in any great detail, and I don't teach the physical body practices of this sort of stuff in any great detail. I have a little taste of those in my system, and I have things I train you in to prepare you to do those things if you want to do them. But I don't teach them because I do them, but you have to know way more information to teach them. So in the chat now, you can see all of these things are here. So let me finally unwind this this whole conversation. So I started thinking about this because Dada Daddy asked if there's a correspondence between the Eightfold Path and the Chinese Bagua. So first of all, let me say I don't charge for anything. Everything I teach is free, or has at least has a free version with the same material that I have elsewhere posted somewhere, right? So if this is valuable to you and you're listening to this asynchronously or you're listening to it live, just take 2 minutes and click one of the links and donate. Because I have to have a certain amount of donations in order to keep the lights on, continue upgrading the setup, and being able to carry on with this. I do this so that you guys know somewhere in the ballpark of about 80 hours a week. So to do that, I can't also have another job doing something else. I could get a job doing something else, and that would take up all of my energy, and I could do this 10 hours a week. But I would much prefer to put every ounce of my being into doing this for you guys. This is all I want to do. So if you're getting value out of this, please do chip in whatever you can, because that's the only way I can carry on doing this. I just have to have a certain amount of funds coming in, or I can't do it. I have to pay the bills. Unfortunately, that's the real world. So if you wanted most of the money to go to me, use Venmo or PayPal. If you wanted, I think on GoFundMe, you can slide the slider down and almost all of that money goes to me also. If you wanted to join my school community, that's where I train the most hardcore people that want to do my stuff in the most serious way. The school link is also in the chat. The school course, I'm building a community of people. Once we have between 100 and 200 members in that course, we'll be able to start sponsoring people to do long-term retreat. So if you wanted to go into retreat for 2 weeks, let's say, and your household bills for half a month, let's say it was $1,000, between 100 of us, that's $10 each. So the whole community, one of the things I'm building with this community is sort of a common ethos that when somebody needs to go into long-term retreat, we're all going to chip in. And because we're all going to chip in, it's going to be a very little amount of money for each of us. But this means that all of us gain the ability to go into longer-term retreats for basically very reasonable amounts of money. So I'm building that community with the school course, and I'm training those people in a little bit more detail than I'm training people in public, because I want them to be able to go into retreat and be successful. And I need to tell you more details about that. But if this sounds interesting to you, then join the school course. That's a great way to support me. And we also have a great community that's growing through the school course. If you want to learn about the energetic and the physical aspects of training and meditation, this primarily comes through the tantras, which you have to have empowerment for. So almost nobody can do these things. And I wouldn't recommend you jump into tantra. You need to spend like 15 years preparing for tantra. Okay, it's not something you jump into overnight. But they have other versions of these things that came through China in the form of Neidan, in the form of Qigong, in the form of bone marrow washing and tendon changing practices and internal martial arts that came through Shaolin Temple. And I just started working with Neil Ripsky, who's a Shaolin lineage holder for an internal martial art called Lohan, the 18 Lohan Palm. And 18 Lohan Palm has this full system of Qigong, Neigong, Doyen, which is similar to yoga, tendon changing, marrow washing. And the idea is that you work with the body and the energy system to make it absolutely ideal for supporting your practice and meditation. And I can tell you with no hesitation whatsoever, those practices will dramatically enhance what you do in your meditation. Dramatically. It is not a subtle thing. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you're already a person that likes martial arts, or you're already a person that likes yoga, do these practices. They will make a huge difference. And at least in my humble opinion, compared to popular yoga, for example, at least popular yoga, these systems are so much more detailed, so much more rich, so much more beneficial than what's sort of commonly out there on the market, because the lineages for these things are still really sort of well put together. They're not popular, right? So the people that do them have these really rich lineages that the sort of watered down versions haven't made it haven't come into existence yet. So Lohan Palm also in the chat. Please do sign up there. We've decided the first 50 people that sign up for the Lohan course will get it half off for the first 3 months. And those spots are going really rapidly. I've had that up for a week, and there's 22 people signed up on the pre-sign up already. There's only 50 spots if you want to get those first 3 months half off. So please do check that out if that sounds at all interesting to you. So now, back to the chat. Data Daddy says, is there a correspondence between the Eightfold Path and the Chinese Bagua? I don't think there's a direct correspondence. But Bagua, because it hasn't gotten as popular as Tai Chi, for example, still, as with 18 Lohan, still has these really deep roots quite often that include all of these other practices that transform the body, transform the energy system. The Bagua at least has the potential to have much more of that. Although Bagua tends to be a much more sort of fighting oriented art, as flowery as it seems. The people that I've talked to that train in Bagua, because it's more rare, it's still extremely martial as compared to Tai Chi, who, because it's gotten so popular, has basically become primarily a health art. Bagua, on the other hand, still is extremely martial, in addition to being a health art. And the same is true for Xingyi. The same is true, I think, for Iron Palm and drunken boxing, which, by the way, doesn't have anything to do with drinking. Okay. What are the causes for the Buddha rebelling against the traditional Vedaism of his time? So I've talked about this in previous streams, so I'm going to be brief. The Buddha was not simply reacting against the Vedic traditions. He was reacting, if to the degree we're saying he's reacting, I think reacting is the wrong word. The Buddha has responses to, let's say, Vedic traditions, Upanishadic traditions, the Shramana traditions, the materialists, the agnostics. In the Buddhist canon, we have records of the Buddha dealing with a huge range of different philosophical and religious challenges. And actually, the Vedic positions amongst those challenges is like an extremely tiny part of a much wider series of things that the Buddha tends to respond to in the canon. Where people tend to go, oh yes, but didn't the Buddha sort of directly refute self, and isn't that a big part of the whole blah 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 blah? Not really. Not really. I mean, if you look at what the Vedas describe for the self and the Upanishads at that time described for the self, the Buddhist concept of not self isn't a direct one-to-one refutation of their idea. It's something else. And I think it's really important to consider that the Buddha said that fleas and fish and gods have a view of a self, and they haven't studied the Vedas. Okay? So whatever it is the Buddha's pointing to in terms of this preconceptual misperception or misknowing of self is not to do directly with the concept of self in the Vedas. It may contradict the view of the self in the Vedas, but that's not what it's doing. It's actually identifying a cognitive error that human beings have. And not just human beings, but all beings who haven't gained realization. And if you look at it from that perspective, you'll understand it much, much, much better than if you try to understand it as some kind of opposite of the view of the self in the Vedas, which, again, I'm not saying it agrees with the Vedas in terms of the self, but there's all sorts of weird stuff you need to think about in terms of the Vedic view of self that, if you think about it for 10 minutes, makes the idea that the Buddhist one is a direct contradiction of that pretty weird. Like, for example, just very briefly, in terms of modern Hinduism, the self is Brahman. the Atman is Brahman. You have an illusion that the self isn't Brahman, and at some point you're going to have the meditative realization that there never was an Atman independent of the Brahman. There's only the Brahman, the whatever you want to call it, the underlying principle of all reality, the universal consciousness, the highest, most pervasive creator deity, inseparable from his creation, her creation, its creation. What exactly how you want to frame this, you can frame it however you like. But wouldn't it be really weird if the Buddha was refuting a self that the Upanishadic traditions potentially said already didn't exist? Like, that's pretty weird. So again, the Buddhist worldview is not simply a response against the Vedas or something. That doesn't make historical, logical, or philosophical sense. Hans talking about the Alex O'Connor podcast. Yeah, that sounds good. Like I said, I like Alex, and it'd be interesting to have a chat with him. He seems like a really good guy, really honest guy. I like the way that he thinks things through and talks things through. He's very sharp, and I think that could be a beneficial conversation. Nath originated from Vajrayana, non-Brahmin, lower cab. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, lots of chatter in the chat. My friends, my dear friends, if you'd like to chat with each other, as I've said before, moderators, please do remind people as they carry on. Because there will be so many questions, it's really tough for me to find the questions if there's a lot of people talking to each other in the chat. If you want to talk to each other while we're live, go to the Discord, put it in the general chat for the Discord, or go to the Facebook group and start a chat on the wall of the Facebook group. Basically, you can have that conversation anywhere else except for here. You can talk a little bit in the chat, but if there's so many comments in the chat that aren't questions that I can't find the questions, that's a problem. So please do bear that in mind, and try to keep the chat pretty clean with just questions or comments I can respond to. Dan asks if the Vedas and Upanishads are totally rejected by Buddhism. I tend to think no. I tend to think that the Vedas and Upanishads have aspects that are accepted by Buddhism. The Buddha, for example, trained in the jhanas with I think we still have some information on one of those teachers today from a historical perspective. So, it's exactly what traditions they were following. Were they Shramana? Were they Vedic? I don't know. But uh, the Buddha wasn't entirely rejecting everything. If you look at the Brahmajala Sutta, where the Buddha is talking about the views of other groups, a number of those groups he calls noble such and such. He calls them noble. Basically, he's saying, you know what, they're kind of headed the right way, and they're doing this honestly, but they're getting a few things wrong. So I don't think the Buddha is rejecting all of this stuff in all of these traditions, but he's saying that he thinks they get certain things wrong based upon various factors. Either their yogis don't have enough clairvoyance to see the whole picture, so they only see part of the picture, which is the elephant, the blind men and the elephant, right? They have these great yogis, but their yogis don't have enough clairvoyant perception to see far enough back and to see a wide enough field to understand the entire elephant. They can only grab onto one part. And so they go, oh, well, the elephant is like a pillar, or the elephant is like a rope, or the elephant is like a big leaf, Or the elephant is like a barrel when they touch its chest, right? Or the elephant is like a whatever, a snake when they touch the trunk. And so, like this, the Buddha says there are all of these all of these noble practitioners who are doing their best and gaining clairvoyance, but they don't have enough clairvoyance to see the whole picture. And because of that, they come to the wrong conclusion. And then they argue with each other about whether or not an elephant is like a pillar or like a rope or like a snake or like a giant leaf or like a barrel. And he says, each one of them is sort of partially right, and they're arguing with each other because they haven't had enough clairvoyance to see the whole picture, but I have. When you read that story on the secular sources, they leave that part out. But the Buddha is saying, I've seen the whole elephant. So the one who's grabbing the leg isn't wrong about the leg, but he thinks that's the whole elephant, and that's what makes him wrong. You understand? Okay. I'd really like to keep the chat clean. If you have nasty things to say about any particular teachers, keep it to yourselves. I don't criticize people. I criticize viewpoints, techniques, practices, etc. And I would prefer if the chat was also maintained in that way. You're welcome to criticize whoever you want on your own time, say whatever you want, but keep it respectful in the chat. Horned Historian asks, could you expound on the concept of Buddhist deity boundaries? Is it safe to surmise that this is kind of a when in Rome situation? You'll have to expand on what you mean by Buddhist deity boundaries, and I'll try to get that question out of order if I see it at the bottom of the chat, okay? I'm not sure what you mean. Okay. All right, my friends. Could attaining nirvana cause someone to suddenly die? Is that a danger for hopefully not mediators, but maybe meditators? I haven't heard anything like that, no. I don't think that's a big danger. Quite a few lamas, Scarf, who do have a fair amount of money, do have charitable organizations connected to their Buddhist activities, where they're doing various kinds of charity that are unrelated to Buddhism or spreading Buddhism. They're just charitable. They're just charitable activities, right? So, for example, if you look at FPMT, which I've done a lot of training with, there's a ton of what is it? Philanthropic efforts that they engage in that are just for the sake of helping people. They have all sorts of stuff that they do that's just for the sake of benefiting people that are in need. So that's very, very common, and how to say, yeah. Okay. Scarf asks about sexual harassment in certain Buddhist communities. Okay, so think about this for a second, all right? From the point of view of Buddhist psychology, until you've attained arhatship, until you've attained full arhatship, until you have attained a state of mind that is nirvana. Okay? You with me? Before that time, you have delusion, and you have the same delusion as everyone else. You have negative emotion. You have the drive to do negative stuff. You have all of the inappropriate motivations that might cause you to do all sorts of things that are unethical. As you get closer and closer and closer to arhatship, those become less and less and less and less powerful. But even somebody that has trained, for example, in concentration for an extremely long period of time is extremely capable in meditative absorption. If they don't have the wisdom aspect at all yet, if they don't have the selflessness aspect at all, if they haven't actually gone closer to nirvana through training in the other aspects of the path that lead there, if all they have is concentration, and they might be able to sit for 14 hours at a time, they could still come out of that meditation and commit something like sexual misconduct. Why? Because they have all of the negative emotions in their mind. And when those aren't suppressed by concentration, they have the potential to follow those negative motivations into every kind of abuse and nonsense you can think of. So, from the point of view of Buddhist psychology, it's actually to be expected that you would find people in power, people who have money, people who have name, people who have reputation, people who have access to potentially abuse people, abusing people. This shouldn't be surprising. It is, because we wish they were better than this, right? Of course, we wish they were better than this. But it's actually not surprising from a Buddhist psychological standpoint, because the process of training that leads to you being in a state where you don't have any of those negative motivations or intentions or the potential to engage in non-virtue is a really long process. Really long. So, yeah. At the end of the day, that's the answer. We're dealing with people, we're dealing with humans, and even if you are capable in meditation, there's still the potential that you're going to do stupid, unethical stuff when you're not meditating, unless you've already attained nirvana. And as I mentioned on the video right before we went live here, it's a long road for most of us. It's a multiple lifetime endeavor for most of us. So all of us and all of the great teachers who haven't gained nirvana have the potential to engage in non-virtue. And that shouldn't surprise you when occasionally there are scandals. I digress. Wada Wada asks what kind of doctor I am. So I have a PhD that is interdisciplinary, covering Buddhist philosophy and the philosophy of science from the Western canon. That's my PhD. My master's degree looked at the cognitive scientific research into meditation and compared it against ancient systems of meditation, in particular those in Buddhism. So that's my academic background. KZ says that whatever I did to show I'm not an AI is what an AI would do. Fantastic. Fantastic. Do you think there are people in current times who have attained jhana? Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. There's a fairly accomplished meditator at Sarah J at the moment. One of my teachers knows this person, and had an interesting conversation with the Dalai Lama, because they were capable of both the tantric samadhis, where you generate the 4 very, very subtle states of mind that you can generate in tantra, and they were capable of the 4 jhanas in the form realm and the 4 formless jhanas. And there's these texts on tantra that say that if you can realize emptiness using even the 4th formless jhana, the most subtle jhana, that's not as powerful as realizing emptiness using the subtlest mind from tantra. And so they wanted to know for themselves in retreat, so they generated all of the jhanas and they were testing it out. Someone was asking, is there a mechanism in Buddhism, right, for seeing if things work or not? This is a great example in modern times. So a great meditator, he's in retreat long term. He generates all the jhanas. He generates all the subtle states of mind that are associated with tantra. And then he tests out, because the text said it would be a certain way, begins testing out whether or not the jhanas are better for realizing selflessness, or these subtle minds are better for realizing selflessness. And he confirms, yes, it is better to use the tantric ones. I mean, you could just imagine, right? You can imagine such a great, accomplished practitioner just wanting to see if it's true, you know? Okay. Abhishek asks if there are prophecies in Buddhism. How far in time? So, Buddhist prophecies basically are very general in character, and they talk about how through very large cycles of time, you find that there are very sort of there are general trends in how things go, um, and we are coming out of a peak right now, and we're headed towards a worse time according to Buddhist cosmology. But within that, there are, it's like the stock market where there are little ups and downs along the way, and then on top of that, if we were looking at sort of the timeline headed like this, you can also turn it sideways, and there are little pockets like this where it's like not bad for these people. It's might as well not even be degenerate times for certain groups of people because of the karmic situation they have as individuals. So is there like any exact general situation that applies to everybody? No. But if you look at everybody collectively, there's sort of a general trend where we're headed down towards worse stuff at the moment, and that goes on for a very long time. So there's going to be ups and downs during our lifetime, and things might even get like extraordinarily good during our lifetime. But at some point, they're going to continue declining again, sort of like the stock market going down like this. And what happens? Lifespans get shorter. There's more conflict. Blah 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 blah. There's all sorts of general descriptions for this you can look up for yourself. And then at some point, you turn the corner and it starts going like this, and it goes up again until the lifespans are extraordinarily long. Buddhist canon says you max out at 84,000 years. That's the longest a lifespan can get in terms of the material limits of lifespan for human beings in this universe. And a human being isn't just a human being, it's any being of sufficient intelligence to understand complex ethics and mind training. Jay asks if I can unpack what it means for all beings to be free from suffering. Suffering is a complex topic in Buddhism. It has three flavors, right? It has three flavors. The suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and all pervasive compounded suffering. Suffering of suffering is anything that is obviously unwanted in terms of your experience. You don't want pain that's meaningless pain in particular. You don't want loss that's meaningless loss. You don't want et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Suffering of change is actually just pleasure. So all pleasures and comforts. Good night, Scarf. See you later. All pleasures and comforts turn into boredom, discomfort, and can actually turn into injury and death if you carry on with that same activity. So think about a bowl of ice cream, right? When you're really hungry and you love ice cream, you look at it and you go, wow, this is going to make me so happy. This is awesome. And you take a bite, and then you immediately look at your phone because you're already disinterested. Despite the fact that it's pleasurable, you're already looking for something else that's going to be more pleasurable than what you're doing, which is pretty ironic. But then you take another bite, and then you take another bite, and probably by the third or fourth bite, you're starting to get a bit bored with the flavor. Maybe by as you get towards the end of the bowl, you're starting to get bored with the flavor. You probably don't want another bowl. If somebody forced you to eat another bowl, you're going to start feeling pretty sick pretty quickly. You're going to start going, man, I really don't want to carry on with this. If somebody forced you to eat a third bowl, you're going to start throwing up. But if somehow you manage to keep it all down, eventually you're going to go into like some kind of sugar coma or sugar shock. And if you keep going somehow, again, if they're force feeding you ice cream, it'll kill you. So pleasure by nature becomes boredom, pain, suffering, death. Right? So pleasure is revealed to be a type of suffering through how it changes. In one of the texts, there's quite a funny way of describing this, and I like it a lot. I like funny ways of describing grim, dark things. It says, if you stand up for a while, it's a relief to sit down. If you sit down for a while, it's a relief to stand up. If you eat too much, it's a relief to stop eating. If you don't eat for a while, it's a relief to eat. Everything is like this, where like every pleasure we have is just a relief from something else that would be pleasurable if we just stayed away from it for a while. Like other pleasures, you know? It's really nuts when you think about it. So then the third type of suffering is that it doesn't have a sensation associated with it. It's just the fact that your perceptual system, your body, your mind are set up in such a way that they will continue in a habitual state of chasing pleasure as if it was happiness, and running away from pain as if pain itself was avoiding pain was the way to achieve happiness. And so your mind is constantly reinforcing this habit of chasing after stuff that it likes, running away from stuff that it doesn't like, and that's how you spend your entire life, and then you die. What a waste. What a terrible waste. And unfortunately, because you do this over and over and over, that is a self reinforcing process, pervasive, compounded suffering. It compounds itself. Doing that makes it happen more. So you chase the suffering and it creates more suffering. It's absolutely horrific, and it doesn't feel like anything when you're doing it. And therefore you can't detect that it's going on, and it's happening all the time. This condition pervades everything else you're experiencing in every realm, and leads to you to death and rebirth also. So even in the highest realm, formless realms where there's no obvious suffering, eventually you die and you fall out of those realms. And so that condition is actually still, despite there being no obvious suffering, within the realm of suffering, because it's pervasive, compounded, right? I hope that makes sense. Still a lot of conversation in the chat, my friends. If you could, I'm having trouble finding the questions. Please do move that conversation off the chat, or if the moderators, if you could just silence the people that are carrying on with that despite numerous requests. Okay, so Abhishek is asking why the gods wield weapons from medieval times. I mean, the deities have, it's interesting, right? Deities will appear to beings in whatever form is beneficial for them at the time they're being seen. Deities, in theory, don't really look like anything in particular. they they can appear as all sorts of stuff. And so since those beings are in that condition because they did all sorts of good stuff by benefiting other beings, their natural inclination, usually, not always, but usually, is to continue benefiting beings. And so they will appear visually and in whatever way they can, in such a way that that form benefits you through every layer of how they're interacting with you, including the symbolic layers of how they're interacting with you. Furthermore, in sort of symbolic language, each of these weapons represents something in terms of your training. So part of the reason all of these deities have all these implements and so forth is because each one of those represents an aspect of your training process. Okay. CD says, okay, that means destiny. Does Buddha teach that all that happens in life is just your choices, or if there is a bigger plan? Okay, good question. So this is a very misunderstood subject, but think about karma and therefore some aspect of destiny, right? Although karma is not destiny, it has functions in some ways similar to a destiny. In the past, you engaged in various actions, both individually and sort of collectively with other beings, and these have effects, and those effects bring about much of the world as we see it, according to Buddhism. And there are sort of pockets of reality that are slightly different for you because of your individual karma than it is than those same pockets of reality for other beings. Really big subject there. Let's try not to scratch the surface of that too hard because we'd be here all night talking about that one issue. Uh, However, inside, also, you have drives, predispositions, likes, dislikes. When you were born, you didn't decide that you liked a certain gender. You didn't decide that you liked pizza more than whatever. You didn't just more than broccoli. You know, you didn't decide you were going to be attracted to this type of person instead of that type of person, or you liked the tall ones, not the short ones, or you liked the short ones, not the tall ones, or that you like houses that are this color instead of that color. You didn't really decide any of these preferences. That you have these drives that you are born with or somehow develop, and you're not quite sure how they got there, but now you're stuck with them, and you like what you like, you don't like what you don't like, etc. This is all functions of these are all functions of karma. Okay, so karmically speaking, you at let's say at the forefront of your mind are these drives and predispositions that are pulling the mind to make certain decisions. If you spend your whole life, like I was just saying, just chasing the stuff that you want and just running away from the stuff that you don't want, all you're doing is chasing the karmas from the past. But in the training materials and the training that even that I do for people for meditation, one of the skills you gain is I have my mind over here. Here's the contents of my mind, and you're learning to just watch the content. Why? Because this is how you gain free will. This should be incredibly profound. Most of us have never made a free decision our entire lives. We've just followed our predispositions. We've just followed what we like and followed what we don't like. To make a free decision, you need to be able to have the mind look at the situation and not be driven by a previous predisposition to simply follow some course of action. It needs to, even with those predispositions appearing, be able to look at the whole circumstance and decide if it's going to go left or right or straight ahead. That's how you have free will. So Buddhism says you do have free will, but because your mind is all these predispositions from the past are trying to pull your mind in all sorts of directions, it's really hard to express that free will. And so most people do just follow those predispositions their whole life, and therefore are following, it's not destiny, but you could say it's similar to destiny. They're following a karmic pathway that was established from the past. They're not actually making free decisions and carrying on through their life in a freely determined way. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that helps. Dada Daddy asks if I've heard much discussed on the Buddha's physical existence in the way that Jesus' existence is discussed by many today. Since we've reached another commercial break point, for those of you who are new, I don't charge for the retreats I do, the meditation classes, the content I make. I don't charge for the open Q&As. I do a lot of phone calls. I'm planning on traveling also to do speaking engagements and so forth. I don't charge for anything that I do. Everything that you learn from me, if you find a paid version of it somewhere, it also exists somewhere else for free. So the only way I'm able to do all of this for free is that the community provides donations. So if you're getting value out of this, for this month, I'm still a little bit behind, in particular because I've spent way more actually than the donations that came in order to upgrade the setup so that it can look like this and sound like this today. Uh, so if you are getting some value from this, either if you find it later or you're getting value from it right now, please do click one of the links in the description below. Use the Venmo, use PayPal, you can use GoFundMe, slide the slider down, and send a donation of whatever you can. For the month, I think I'm still short about 600 pounds or so. Um, so since we're getting towards the end of the month, whatever you can send through will be really, really helpful so that I can keep the lights on and I can carry on doing this for another month. You can pause the stream, come back in 2 minutes and hit play, and I'll be right here carrying on as I am now. So please do click one of the links, make a donation. That'll be very, very helpful. And then I can carry on doing this 80 hours a week and helping people and helping you. And I was talking to a lovely young woman in Hong Kong a couple of days ago, and she is out of work at the moment. And I'm not going to tell anybody who this is because you're going to see this later. But I'm not going to tell people your business. I'm never going to name people's names when I tell these stories. But she felt very bad because she wasn't able to do anything or contribute anything financially, etc. And I just looked at her and I said, listen, someone else who's doing a little better right now is contributing so that I can spend 4 hours on the phone with you, talking to you and helping you with your practice. And at some time later, maybe you'll be doing well, and that other person who was able to contribute today isn't doing so well, and your support will allow me to spend 3 hours on the phone with them. That's how this works. You see what I mean? So if you're listening to this right now and you're getting some value and you do have the means to support the endeavor, please do chip in, because that's what allows me to help a lot of other people. And hopefully at some point, if you're not doing well and I'm still around and this is producing value still for some people, those people will be able to chip in and I'll be able to help you just the same as I am now. You see? So this is what I'm hoping to build in terms of community. I give away all my time for free. And a few people support me in doing that so that other people get it for free. And if enough people are doing that in the community, then the whole thing gets to carry on like this, which I think is really cool. hopefully that resonates with some people, because I've talked to my teachers about this, and this is the most ethical way. This is the most ethical way I could come up with, talking to one of my teachers about it, to make it all work. If you'd like to train with me a little bit more hardcore while supporting the whole thing financially, click on the school course. The school course is $29 a month. All of that information is available for free elsewhere. But the people that want to train with me hardcore and support building a really hardcore community of meditators who will support each other going into long-term retreat, I'm building a community through the school course that will support each other doing much more serious study and training and practice. So that's a great way to support this from month to month, and you get that community along with it, which is pretty cool. So you could do that. Yeah, that would be a good way to do it as well. Right. So, Buddha's physical existence. We have pretty good reason, based upon the archaeological evidence at this point, and this wasn't always true. I think before 1870 or 1880 or something, this maybe wasn't true. But Buddha's physical existence is pretty well proven at this point. We have, I think, archaeological evidence going back to the 5th century or something. We have a stupa, and we have some other stuff. So I think it'd be pretty difficult to figure out how all this got started and blah 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 if we didn't have a real physical Buddha. Why did the Bodhisattva require 400,000 kappas to perfect the paramis? Okay, so Sasa, according to, I think, both the Theravada canon and the Mahayana canons, if a person wants to pursue the non-tantric path to Buddhahood, it is an extremely long period of time to attain what's called to attain the status of a wheel turning Buddha, which is a being who takes rebirth when no other Buddhist teachings are available and reestablishes them in that place and time, basically for those people for the first time. So is reintroducing the Dharma after it is basically completely gone from the world. And to set that condition up and to have the merit and the good karma and the connections with a whole bunch of other beings takes an exceedingly long period of time. An exceedingly, exceedingly long period of time. Millions of lifetimes. On the sutra path. On the tantric path, you can do it much faster. If you're not trying to attain the state of a wheel-turning Buddha, you're just trying to attain the state of Buddhahood. So if you're not trying to become a wheel-turning Buddha, using tantric techniques, they say you can attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. And I think this idea also exists, if I'm not mistaken, in Zen. There's a few schools of Buddhism that basically came to the conclusion that, well, if you're not trying to become a wheel-turning Buddha, the timeline's a bit shorter. And there are methods you can use that make it even shorter than it would otherwise be. So in the Tantras, I think they say that the dumbest among us who engage in Tantra and do it poorly but keep their vows clean can attain Buddhahood in 16 lives or 17 lives. And then a person of middling capacity, it's 7 or 8, if I'm recalling correctly. And then for the next one down, I think it's 3. And then for the truly extraordinary, they can do it in a single life. Speaking for myself, I would sign in blood for attaining Buddhahood 16 lifetimes from now. So I'm happy if it's 16 lifetimes. I'll take that. I'll take that deal. Okay, carrying on. What should a materialist atheist do from a Buddhist point of view for welfare or progress or advancements, or what Buddhists think they should practice or adopt? Okay, some interesting things happening at the bottom of the chat there. Right. So, okay. So when we're talking about good character, good ethics, there's something quite interesting that I discovered about ethics and character. I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. If you train in good character and ethics, it turns out that those things that lead to good karma, good rebirth, etc., are generally speaking good for you in this life also. So, with rare exception, your pursuit of good ethics, good character, etc., is what improves your life for you. Your pursuit of concentration does improve your life for you. Your pursuit of patience, perseverance, generosity, humility, etc. If it doesn't always lead to external prosperity for you necessarily, but in terms of your internal well-being, having good character and having ethics increases your internal well-being regardless of the external circumstances, but also tends to increase your prosperity externally also. If you're under better control and you have perseverance and you have willpower and you have decent ethics so people know they can rely on you for stuff, and you have crazy drive to get stuff done, and you feel joy when you're engaged in things that are actually producing real effects in the real world, and you have concentrated focus, so your mind is laser sharp when you're doing stuff, my goodness, your potential to achieve things in the world is going to be much better than the average person. And that's before we've even begun talking about rebirth. So as long as your ethics don't degenerate because you're trying to accomplish stuff in the world, then you're headed somewhere good from a Buddhist perspective. So that's what I would say, broadly speaking. Buddha said there's no self. What did he mean? Not no self and not self is referring to the fact that, for example, when you look at a mountain, it seems like the mountain is out there and it has nothing to do with you whatsoever, doesn't it? It's millions of years old. It's giant. It's been here practically forever, at least as far as I'm concerned, because it's been here so long. Nothing to do with me, right? That's how it seems. However, if I ask you a stupid question like, where does the mountain end? All of a sudden it becomes pretty clear that you have no idea what this object is. You have no idea what a mountain is. Does it end in the foothills? Does it end on flat ground? How far under the ground does it end? Are the loose rocks on top of the mountain, or are they just loose rocks? What about the water? Is the water on the surface of the mountain part of the mountain? Is the water running through the mountain part of the mountain? What about all the bacteria and critters and all sorts of other things? Are those the mountain, or are those not the mountain? Are those just things on the mountain? Where does the mountain begin? Where does it end? What is the mountain, and what isn't the mountain? These are pretty basic questions, because if a thing exists, there should be something about it. There should be something about it that makes it different from other things, so that it's clear what it is and what it is not, right? I mean, that's the most basic definition of an entity, of a thing, is that there's stuff about it that makes it what it is, and there's stuff about it that makes it not other things, right? It's pretty basic. But you look at this giant 400 million year old mountain, and you have no idea where it begins and ends. You have no idea what parts are included or excluded. So the Buddha is saying the mountain that you think is there, when you say mountain, isn't there. You look at that thing and you go, there's a mountain out there, and that mountain has nothing to do with me, and that mountain has been here for 4 million years. It's absolutely clear there's a mountain there. No one is debating this. Blah, 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 right? Of course there's a mountain there. Of course there's a mountain. And then someone asks a stupid question, like a childish question. Where does it end? Where does it begin? What's included? What's not included? And it's immediately clear the mountain that you think is there couldn't possibly be there in the way it appears. So the Buddha is saying, in the way it appears, you have a cognitive error in your cognitive process where you see the mountain existing in a way it doesn't exist. That mountain doesn't exist. The one that appears doesn't exist, because the one that appears in a way it doesn't exist. Once again, let me say that again. The mountain that appears to you doesn't exist because the mountain that appears to you is infused with a cognitive error that causes the mountain to appear to exist in a way that it doesn't exist. So that mountain is no mountain, not mountain, right? That mountain is utterly non-existent. The one that you think exists out there, utterly independent of stuff, with absolutely clear boundaries that makes it what it is, that everyone can obviously see, that one's not there at all. So how do mountains exist? As dependent arisings. A mountain is a dependent arising. Mountains aren't non-existent. Mountains are real things, but mountains are dependent on a whole bunch of causes and conditions. A mountain is a set of relationships, not an entity. And one of the relationships it depends upon, in addition to cause and effect and parts and whole, is the relationship between subject and object. So I don't have enough time to go into the full argument, but in brief, the Buddha is saying the mountain exists in a different way than the one you perceive it to exist. How does it exist? We call the way it actually exists dependent arising. So that mountain, the dependently arisen mountain, exists. However, you don't see the dependently arisen mountain, you see the non dependent mountain. This is what your perception presents you with. Behind it somewhere is a dependently arisen mountain, but you don't see that one. You see this mountain that exists in a way that it doesn't exist. So this mountain right here, utterly non existent. Behind it, dependently arisen mountain actually does exist. But you don't see this one. You don't experience this one. And the way this exists is completely different from the way this one appears, which is why we're saying this is utterly non existent. This one, completely non existent. And the one behind it doesn't exist at all in the way that you think it does, because the way you think it does is you think, well, when I get rid of the fake one, there's going to be a real one behind it that exists the way that the fake one exists, and it doesn't exist that way. We call this way that it actually exists dependent arising. It depends upon a whole bunch of relationships, cause and effect, parts and whole, and subject and object. It depends on a complex of relationships. So that's, in brief, what's going on with not self, no self philosophy. Okay. Sorry, there's so much stuff in the chat. Again, I'm okay. Good, good, good. Working my way through. Why don't I become a monk? I've told that story on live before. My teacher told me not to become a monk. My teacher told me that, asked me this question. He said, "Do you want to help people?" I said, "Yeah, of course." Because I was planning on becoming a monk. I spent a lot of time researching monasteries and reaching out to some monasteries and so forth when I was new to all this. And my teacher said, "Do you want to help people?" And I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Then don't become a monk." And I said, "What do you mean? Shouldn't I become a monk if I want to help people?" And he said, "No, if you become a monk, most people in this world, they don't know what a monk is. And if you become a monk, then you will cut yourself off from helping all of those people who can't understand and don't understand what a monk is. And therefore, you will help way less people than if you stay a layperson. Furthermore, it's more difficult to do certain kinds of practices, advanced practices, if you're a monastic as opposed to a layperson. And training as a layperson is much more difficult than training as a monastic. And your real life becomes the crucible, the test as to whether or not you're actually gaining realization. And it can be harder, at least according to my teacher, can be harder in the midst of monastic life without these kinds of challenges. It can be more difficult to see whether or not you're gaining realization. And so my teacher convinced me through a number of reasons to not ordain. I was going to ordain. I got very close to taking quite serious steps, and my teacher convinced me not to. Mountain license. Yeah, bring it on, my man. Bring on the questions. Dada Daddy, Bagua elements. Yeah, okay, fair enough. This is true about Tantra. Must have been when I was talking about Tantra. Okay, so about Bagua and the 8 elements and so forth. While we're on the subject, um, Neil Ripsky, who, if you'll put the Lohan course in the chat one more time, Neil Ripsky is actually, I don't know that he holds a Bagua lineage, but he's trained at a very high level in Bagua, Xingyi, Tai Chi in 2 different styles, Iron Palm, and drunken boxing, which has nothing to do with drinking, really. And he has extraordinarily wide-ranging experience in the Chinese internal arts. So in addition to holding the 18 Lohan Palm lineage, which he's going to be teaching in this course that I'm helping him put together, part of the supplementary materials for that course, or an adjunct to that course, may eventually also be, of course, this is down the road a bit, but may also be some supplementary materials from these other arts that help you do Lohan better. You know, because each of the great internal arts of China, I mean, all of them were designed to a degree with things like bone marrow washing, tendon changing, becoming aware of the qi body, the shen body, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they're all working with similar components, and then they're taking those components and they're sort of working them, reworking them with how to say, slightly different angle on the issue in mind. And again, Neil Ripsky has trained in to a high level and to a great degree in each of these great, sort of the great 3. But his has now turned his attention, after teaching those and learning those for many years, has turned his attention in his later years to teaching the 18 Lohan system. So very, very pleased that he's taken that direction, and very pleased to be helping him with that, because frankly, I don't want the Lohan system to go out of existence. You know, he's 50 years old. He's probably got 20, maybe 30 good years of teaching left in him. So you kind folks and people like me need to take this lineage on full on, learn all the details, and become lineage holders so that it doesn't go out of existence in the next generation. One of you who hears this may be that person. I hope you are. And in addition to that, if you get on the pre-sign up list, the first 50 people are going to get the first 3 months half off. So if you have any interest in learning about Lohan, Chinese internal martial arts that are similar to Xingyi, Bagua, Tai Chi, Neil is one of the best I have ever encountered, period, in these arts. So very much worth listening to. Okay. Mountain license. Is consciousness intertwined with the brain? I would say human level consciousness is intertwined with the brain. And then, yeah, you know, basically Buddhism has the idea, at least as far as I'm concerned, that consciousness is a neutral monism of extremely subtle physical substances and non-physical awareness. And there's a two-way street between coarse physical substance, subtle physical substance, and non-physical consciousness. There's a two-way street between these things. So if you do something with consciousness, it affects the subtler physical substances, which affects the body. If you do something with the body, it affects the subtle physical substances and it affects the mind. If you do something with the subtle physical substances, it affects the mind and it affects the body. So these 3 have conversations with each other. So if you do stuff to the brain, like, I don't know, drink alcohol or take drugs, it affects what your awareness is doing. Right? Or if you get in a car accident and damage part of the brain, it affects what your consciousness can do at the level of having experiences in the physical world. Did you say that you're going to make a video about this? Did the Buddha just say the opposite of the Vedas? I'm gonna make a video on that. I've talked to one of my advisors from my uni about what texts and materials I need to bring on board, because I need to study In a bit more detail, the earliest period and all the archaeological evidence and all the textual evidence from both the Buddhist canon, the Jain canon, and the Vedic Upanishadic canon to just get that whole period of history in my head and collect the right information together. So that's coming, but probably not very quickly. Consciousness is deeply intertwined with the brain during your life, not trapped or created by the brain. Yep, I tend to agree. Mountain asks, I'm still helping people find lineages through Discord and other places. Yeah, if you need help finding a lineage, I'm happy to help you do that as best I can. I'm not always going to be fast at doing things, but I'm very much happy and interested in helping people find good lineages wherever they happen to be. Donald Burke asks, you talk a lot about the early scriptures. What do you think about Zen and how it's taught today? Great question. So when I do videos, very often I use the Pali sources, because if I don't use the Pali sources, then people say these things don't exist in the Pali sources. And since, as modern people all over the world, basically everyone thinks that earlier is better, earlier is more authentic, earlier is where all of the interesting things are happening. And because they think Pali canon equals earlier, therefore, if it's not in the Pali, it's not legitimate. I don't agree with that at all, actually. I have huge problems with that. I don't agree with that. I don't even think that's historically accurate, because the earliest sutra we have from the 2nd century BCE is a Mahayana Prajnaparamita Sutra in Gandharan. So people who have that idea aren't even up on the most recent scholarship. The first complete copy of the Pali Canon we have is from the 6th century CE. Furthermore, the Pali Canon itself says that they edited it twice, and we don't know what they threw out. Furthermore, if we are to believe the Pali sources, they had a number of councils, and they didn't allow anyone who wanted to come and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. They were selective in who they let come to the councils. Okay? So, right from the beginning, if a group is being selective about who's allowed to come and who's allowed to contribute to the canon, then we already have an authority issue where it's entirely conceivable that the Buddha taught these people one thing, taught these other people something different, and that this lineage continued independent of this stream that was considered to be the official stream of stuff, right? Which, by the way, is the narrative that is given in the Mahayana canon. They say Mahayana was not taught to as many people. And then Tantra was taught to a very small number of people, in addition, sort of as a subset of the Mahayana stuff. And then these things were kept as oral traditions, just like the Pali, what would become the Pali materials. And then in addition to that, you have, there's other things to consider. If you're a full-on Buddhist and you believe in Nagas and Devas and other beings that aren't human beings, the Buddha called himself teacher of gods and human beings. Excuse me, wait, what? The Buddha called himself, in the Pali Canon, the teacher of gods and human beings. You're telling me the Buddha gave teachings to gods? That's interesting. Does that mean that the gods have some teachings that maybe the human beings don't have? Huh, okay. Interesting. Okay, let me tell you a little story. Venerable Asanga wanted to see Maitreya, who is to become the next Buddha. He spent 12 years meditating in a cave. Long story short, he basically failed and didn't see Maitreya, became very depressed. He was on his way back to the monastery. Through a series of circumstances, Maitreya actually appears before him, takes him to a heavenly realm, teacher of gods and human beings, takes Maitreya to a heavenly realm and teaches him 5 texts and says, these are materials you need to take back down to earth and teach to the Buddhist community at this time. So this is the 2nd or 3rd century Common Era in the high Indian Buddhist tradition that would become Nalanda. He writes these 5 texts down. His brother Vasubandhu, Venerable Vasubandhu, writes 5 commentaries on them, and those 10 texts are still some of the most important central texts of Buddhism today. They are amongst the most widely distributed, most important texts that we have today. In addition to this, you may have heard of a little somebody called Venerable Nagarjuna. Venerable Nagarjuna said that some of the teachings that he got were directly from the Buddha, but they weren't taught to human beings. They were taught to Nagas. Teacher of gods and human beings. Do you really believe the Buddha in the Pali Canon when he said he taught other beings besides humans, or do you not believe that? If you do believe it, why would you reject the teachings that people say they got from beings who aren't human beings, that the Buddha taught these things to? Why would you reject those? On principle, why would you reject them? Are you saying the Buddha lied? Or are you saying that those beings wouldn't give those teachings to human beings at some point? Again, the Madhyamaka school, for example, and the Chittamatra school came from people who said they got these teachings from other beings who the Buddha taught at the time of the Buddha. Furthermore, there's a whole nother consideration. If we sort of throw out that explanation and say, well, maybe they came up with it themselves. Okay, fine. Do you think that other beings can gain the same realization as the Buddha, or do you not? If you don't think that anyone else can attain the realizations of the Buddha, let's just close the book and pack up and go home. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Because if none of us can do this, why are we here? On the other hand, if other people can do this, if other people can gain the same realizations of the Buddha, why would you reject materials that came later? Why would you say no one else is allowed to add to the canon now that the Buddha is gone if other people can gain the exact same realization as the Buddha? Are you with me? If other people can gain the exact insight, the exact realization, the exact capabilities as the Buddha, why would you reject later people in the canon who gain those capabilities adding to the canon at a later time? Why would you reject those things? So even if they added something in the 6th century or the 12th century or the 18th century or the 20th century, why would you reject those things? It doesn't make any sense. And you might say, well, the Buddha was enlightened, but how do you know? And these other people weren't enlightened. How do you know? You don't know. You don't have any more reason to think the Buddha was enlightened than these people. And you don't have any less reason to think. Especially when you consider the work of a Sangha is absolutely mind-blowing in its detail, complexity, sophistication. And it's describing how you progress down the bodhisattva path towards Buddhahood. When you look at the way that Nagarjuna's work explains finally this huge body of Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom literature, his work finally explains in a detailed way, in a way that is really satisfying, that was lacking up until that time. Finally, this huge body of literature that exists in the canon. By the way, our earliest sutra, as I said, is a Prajnaparamita sutra. Nagarjuna's work finally explains this and makes it really clear what's going on with all that literature. Why would you reject it? Hey, Brian, welcome to the stream. So I think since there are so many questions, I will have to leave it at that. Do I think Zen is valid? Absolutely. Do I think the Tantras are valid? Absolutely. Do I think the Mahayana is valid? Absolutely. Do I think that the people who have added to the Theravada canon practices, that those are valid? Absolutely. I think that all of these lineages that are full on proper lineages are valid things to do. Okay, so, Mountain License asks, why is the non-direct consequence of fixing bombs for the military to be avoided, but the non-direct consequence of buying animal products is so detached from animal suffering? Okay, so when you buy an animal product, according to the Buddha, you don't form the intent to harm anything, and through that action there's no future being who's being harmed as the result of that. You're there, and the flesh, they say in the great commentary on the Pali Canon that's still used in I think every Theravadan country that's practicing Theravada Buddhism, they say this is called flesh that already exists. A being who is not killed specifically for you, nor at your request, etc. That this being whose flesh is simply here now is just there. And you as a person, in terms of the karmic pathway you're taking through this action of eating meat, haven't engaged in anything that's even approaching non-virtue. You're simply there to have a meal. You're simply there because you're hungry and you want something to eat. You never formed a harmful intent. You never formed ill will. You never developed anger. So you're simply there to have a meal, to fulfill the biological need you have for energy and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if you make a sword, which is sort of the classic example, if you make a sword, well, this sword is now going to be carried by some, and you're making it for an army. This sword is now going to be carried into battle very soon, probably, to kill someone. So there's a very direct correlation between you making that sword right now and that other being killed in the future. And also in terms of karmic weight, the death of a human being is heavier than the death of an animal. For example, when you take pratimoksha vows, you don't lose the vow from the root if you kill an animal or a non-human being. You only lose that vow from the root if you kill a human being. And the reason for this is that killing a human being has much more karmic weight than killing a non-human being. And you may kind of not like that as a general explanation, but this is what the Buddha teaches. So in terms of Buddhist ethics, it is what it is in terms of the algebra of the ethical framework. How legitimate are terma distinguished from illegitimate terma? How are legitimate versus illegitimate terma distinguished by Vajrayana Lamas? That's a difficult question. Whether or not you accept a Tantra practice that came later in the canon that was revealed by, in theory, a Buddha to a particular teacher, or by a bodhisattva, or a highly accomplished being to a highly accomplished Vajrayana practitioner. I think there's some discretion there. I think you just have to use your best judgment, because it's hard to create a criteria that's going to be absolutely ironclad. Yeah, I think that's all I can say about that. Do I give Dylan asks? Oh, Dylan, by the way, Dylan. Oh no, never mind. Do I give much credence to the yuga cycles in Hindu cosmology? Okay, before we go there, very quickly, we've got a lot of new people in the stream. Very quickly, everyone, moderator, if you're still here, if you'll pop the links in the chat, I do all of this for free. I lead retreats for free, teach classes for free, make content for free. I'm trying to keep ads off of my content and trying not to do any paid promotional things, etc. To do all that, there has to be a certain amount of donations that come from the community. We're getting pretty close to the end of the month, and I think I'm still short in the ballpark of about £500 in that ballpark. So whatever anyone can chip in tonight will be very, very meaningful since we're here at the end of the month. The best way to send funds through it would be through Venmo, PayPal, or GoFundMe. And on GoFundMe, you can slide that percentage that goes to GoFundMe down, I believe, to whatever amount you'd like, so that most of it ends up going to me. Since I do all this for free for the benefit of the community, I have to have a certain amount of donations to carry on doing it. For better or worse, I have to keep the lights on. So if you're getting value from this, please do just pause the stream for 2 minutes, pop over there, make a donation of whatever you can to try to help me get to that goal that I need before the end of the month, and then pop back over to the stream. That would make a huge difference because there's already been 300 people on this stream. I know a huge number of them didn't donate anything, but they were able to get this for free because of people who have donated over the last 2 months. Do you understand what I mean? So if you have the means and the will and you're getting some value out of this, whether you're listening to it today or later on, please do contribute what you can, because that's the only way I can carry on doing this. And, since it's early days, every bit really does count. If you can chip in £5, chip in £5. If you can chip in £100, fantastic. Chip in £100, whatever you can, please do contribute so that I can carry on doing this. I really do spend somewhere in the ballpark of 80 hours a week, sometimes more than that, doing this. And I want to carry on doing that. But if I don't get enough to pay all the bills, etc., then I can't. I'll have to do something else. And that means I won't be able to devote as much time to helping you guys with this stuff. So please do chip in what you can. That is very, very, very much needed at this time and very beneficial because it'll allow me to carry on doing this. Okay. Do I give credence to the yuga cycles in Hindu cosmology? I think they're very similar to the Buddhist ones, so I give them some credence. Kazapua, welcome back. Good to see you again. What donation method gives you the fullest portion? Venmo or PayPal. Then almost all of it goes to me, I believe. On GoFundMe, I think you can slide the slider down, and almost all of it goes to me. But Venmo and PayPal, I think all of it actually goes to me, and then there's like a tiny fee when I'm taking it off the platform, but it's very small, if anything. Sharma, why do Buddhists believe in reincarnation? So if you go to Sharma, if you go to the Discord, on the Discord server, I have in the common questions section a 45-minute response to that question. There is a huge amount of evidence for rebirth/reincarnation. We're actually living at the peak of history in terms of having evidence for rebirth and reincarnation. There has never been a better time to hold this viewpoint with confidence and to be comfortable in the idea that rebirth and reincarnation are a real thing. If you'd like to have more information on that, I also posted, I think, 2 books next to that 45-minute response where I talk about it at great length. So just pop over to the Discord, and you can read that. Thank you, Mountain License. I appreciate you. Appreciate you sending through a little something. That means a lot. Do I reply? I can see you're down there at the bottom. I do it in the order of the chat. So I'm going to be going through one comment and question at a time. So I will get to you eventually. Okay, Vincent, how do you see China as of now playing a great role in Buddhist globalization? The issue with China, as a general thing, is this. They have, as far as I can tell, taken the key leadership positions for the major denominations of Buddhism in China. And because they know that the general population who are faithful Buddhists, as an example, and faithful Taoists and Confucians and some blend of these some blend of these traditions, often quite what do they call it, syncretically. Uh, they've taken the leaders of those organizations and they've made them into political figures. So they have to be full on party members to hold those positions. And in Tibet, for example, which is now considered to be part of China, they have taken the major monasteries and more or less turned them into tourist attractions. And I've heard they've done the same to Shaolin. However, there are still little pockets of genuine practice going on in China. There's a wonderful documentarian who talks about that, and I'm going to be reviewing one of his documentaries at some point in the next couple of months. There are still some practitioners really doing fantastic stuff in China, but it's difficult to find, more difficult than ever before, probably. Can you separate the mountain from your awareness of the mountain? Not sure what you mean. Roughly speaking, if you train in what I call Foundation 4, if you train in Mahamudra practice, one of the fundamental experiences you have when you have a non-dual experience of your senses, in particular vision, let's say you're looking at the mountain, you see the mountain, and when you train in concentration, the concentration increases and increases and increases on the visual field. And then at some point, the concept that divides the field into various objects get pulled back. And then the concepts that divide the subject from the object get pulled back. And so what you're left with is that field is still appearing, but there's no objects. And there's no separation between the subject and the object. And so the experience you have is one in which there's no subject, no object, and yet all of the things that are making up that experience are still there. So this is non-dual experience of the visual field of consciousness. And this is a relatively beginner experience, relatively speaking. One of my students who's been with me now 4 years had that start happening at about 3.5 years into the practice. So pretty early days, you know. And it's not an unimportant experience, but it is a beginner experience. So yeah, you can pull back the concept of a mountain from what you're seeing of the mountain, and you can see that the mountain is actually not part of the visual experience of the mountain. That is possible. Are sentient beings just delusional Buddhas? You know, I tend to disagree with that way of formulating things. I tend to think that it's much more helpful to consider that you have the potential to become a Buddha, and that there are certain parts of you that will carry on from where you are now into Buddhahood, but that you are not a Buddha yet. There's potential for some people to start with this idea that I'm a Buddha and turn it into a massive delusion, and I've seen that happen on I don't know how many occasions. But yeah, it's worth avoiding that outcome to simply avoid that kind of language. Work is bunker. Remember when your Buddhist master said, I don't have time to teach you something, and he meant it? Nope. I can't remember a time like that. Work is bunker. All this man does is confuse and obscure. Quite the opposite, my friend. The entire endeavor is to remove confusion and obscuration. Zen Studio, what's the Buddhist view of time, the multiverse, and time travel? Well, actually, let me go back to the comment that Work is bunker is saying is more intelligent than what I'm saying here. Explain to me very carefully and think about what you just said. Our labeling mind gives the mountain independence. How is it possible that the thing itself would become independent because of relying on your mind to become independent? This is absolutely nonsensical. That is confusion. That is an obscured mind, where you think the thing itself becomes independent by relying on something else. That's insane, actually. Something can't become independent by being dependent. By definition, it's dependent if it's dependent, not independent. It can appear independent by depending upon something else that you don't notice it depends upon, but it's not actually independent. It's dependent. Okay. Time, multiverse, time travel. I don't think there's time travel in Buddhism. There's multiverse is not like the quantum multiverse where there's I don't know 17 million versions of you sitting here listening to this live stream in different universes. There's nothing like that in Buddhism. Whether or not this is the only universe is an open question. I don't know. There's some room for that interpretation in the canon, I think. And the view of time, generally speaking, Buddhism says there are three times. There's the past, there's the present, and there's the future. But the past is gone, the future is yet to arise, and so the present is all there actually is. Even though we can still reasonably talk about things that happened before now and things that might happen in the future. Am I married? Yes, I'm married. 10 years. Thoughts exist, but no thinker of those thoughts can be found. I think that's the second time you've said that on one of my lives. Yeah, you can. You can find a thinker. Your mind is the thinker. Congratulations. You're welcome. Where did the thought come from? Your mind. So who's the thinker? The mind is the thinker. If I build something with this hand, who's the builder of the object? The hand. The hand that built the object is the builder. If your mind generates a thought, who's the thinker? The mind. The mind that generated the thought is the thinker. Who is not the thinker? The one that appears that you thought was the thinker, independent of the mind. You think there's a you existing independent of the mind that is the thinker. That one doesn't exist at all. But the mind that generated the thought is the thinker. In the same way that your hand, if it's holding a hammer and hammering a nail, is the one hammering. Did I get married after declining monk ordination? Yes, that's true. Quite a while after deciding I wasn't going to be a monk. Quite a while after I got married. I think it was almost 10 years after deciding I wasn't going to become a monk that I became married, and now I've been married 20 years. And I've been married another 10. Simply Gong Fu says that Neil Ripsky shared his Lohan a few years ago. It was around the time his school got robbed and was in transition. and it's a good practice. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've trained in the system or know people who have trained in it and you think it's a good system. Honestly, I've just seen what he can do with other things. He is one of the, okay, I don't say this sort of thing often, but I've been a Chinese internal arts person for a long time, since I was 16. There are very few people in the world, period, who can demonstrate certain internal skills from training in the Chinese internal arts. Hands down, whether you're talking about Asia or you're talking about the West or wherever, the number of people that can demonstrate high level skills in those arts is extremely small. The number of people that can demonstrate those skills and don't like put them on camera every 4 seconds to try to make money from it is an even smaller number. Neil is one of those people. Neil, when he heard, for example, maybe he'll find this live stream and get a laugh out of this. Because he's not very good with technology, he had a video, I think, listed as unlisted, where he showed a skill that he has from his training in internal arts, where he can lift his feet off the ground and still ground out someone pushing him full force. In other words, he's marching in place and somebody's leaning with all their body weight and trying to shove him, and he basically stays in the same place. It looks physically impossible. It's not. I mean, I know how to do it. It's a thing you can learn how to do in internal arts, but it's really, again, and that was years ago. That was something like 12 years ago. Neil is one of these people that has high level skills in these arts. And to have high level skills in these arts is an extremely rare, extremely difficult thing to do. And the fact that he's also unbelievably humble about it. I've said this before, but I had to scour the internet for 120 hours using every bit of my knowledge about how to research things and find things out to find out what Neil has done, what he's accomplished, where he's trained, who he's trained with, what lineages he holds and things, because he was too humble to tell me. By the way, he didn't build his website and talk so nicely about himself. I built his website and I put all that stuff on there because he would never do that. So this is an indication also, the fact that he doesn't want people to know how good he is at things and he doesn't want to talk himself up is an indication that he has real accomplishment in his practices. Do you understand? This is one of the signs that a person has gained some accomplishment in their practices. They don't want to make a big deal out of themselves. This is how you know that I suck at all this. For those of you who are a little bit impressed by me, I'm actually not that good at this. I've said it before, but I'm like a little fingernail. My guru was a whole body. Okay. As a Madhyamaka, okay, that's not a question. Brienne, maybe. Brian, maybe. Hi, hello, welcome. Story point with lots of T's. Isn't that wrong if everything is equal? I think maybe it was changed later. Do you think it's hard to find original teachings? Frankly, I'm not concerned so much with original teachings. I think the historical critical method is not the best method to use when you're looking at Buddhism. A much better method to use is, does this work? Can I reason my way through this and find it to be true? Can I apply it in real life and find that it works? These are much better methods for Buddhist stuff. Mountain is asking about the meat industry. So on 2 different occasions, when directly questioned about this, the Buddha specifically rejected what I call the economic argument against meat eating. One occasion, he was invited to a banquet with a king, and the king was I can't remember the circumstances exactly, but basically was going to serve like a whole cow or something at the dinner. And I don't remember the circumstances precisely, but I think it was that maybe the cow had already been killed earlier, or they were going to go to the butcher where the cow was already deceased or something like this. And the Jains were criticizing the Buddha for going to this big expensive banquet with a king, where basically through the economic incentive, right? The economic incentive that the Buddha is allowing people to feed him meat, that he is supporting this wider situation of suffering. And the Buddha said, no, that's not how karma works. I reject this argument. And then on another occasion, when his cousin Devadatta, Venerable Devadatta, was trying to divide the Sangha at the time of the Buddha, his cousin tried to divide the Sangha in two. And as far as I know, he was not successful in this. But one of the arguments that he used was, in my new Sangha, we're not going to eat meat because eating meat creates basically this economic incentive where animals will be killed in the wider environment, and therefore we're responsible for this, and therefore we have to not eat meat. And the Buddha once again said, no, that's not my teaching. Basically, that's not how karma works. You don't have any responsibility whatsoever for those beings. They were going to be, it doesn't put it quite this way, but they were going to be killed anyway. Their karma is to die. Their karma is to be killed. The lifespan in terms of their karma was exhausted already. You had nothing to do with this. You just happened to turn up and the dead body was there. So the Buddha rejects this argument about the economic incentive. And it's not one that you're going to reason your way through. It's just not that kind of argument. It has to do with the karma of beings. It has to do with the karmic situation. It has to do with the fact that you're training towards enlightenment and you're trying to create clean karmic pathways heading to enlightenment. You can't fix the world. You can't. You can fix yourself. And you don't need to stop eating meat to fix yourself, because there's no negative karma associated with eating meat if you're not breaking your vows in regards to killing when you eat meat. This is the position of the Buddha. You don't have to like it, but it is the position of the Buddha. Okay. Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm at the bottom of the chat. It's miraculous. It's not 5 a.m. Thoughts on a secondary Dalai Lama when the current one passes away? China is definitely going to have their own Dalai Lama, who will be a political figure, and they will probably roll that person out in China and in Tibet as soon as they can to try to take away from whoever the real Dalai Lama is having as much legitimacy and power. Yep, that's definitely coming after the Dalai Lama dies. Unless something dramatically changes before he dies in terms of Chinese politics, that is almost a certainty. What's older, Buddhism or Jainism? As far as we know, they came up right at the same time. They're right at the same time. They're both new movements occurring right around the same time. Okay, we have reached the bottom of the chat. Thank you all so much for being here. That will be the last question for the day. So, once again, if you're here or you find this later, please do hit the like button. That'll help people find this. If you have a meaningful comment, the algorithm's pretty smart. So if you have a meaningful comment of some kind, put it in the comment section down below and I'll answer the comment. And having sort of real substantive comments in the comment section drives the content out to more people. So that can be quite helpful for helping the channel grow and more people find it and more people be benefited. And likewise, as a final reminder, I don't charge for anything, and the things that it seems like I'm charging for, I have for free elsewhere. So people are welcome to pay for them or not. They're still going to get it if they want it. Having said all that, I do still need to make a certain amount before the end of the month if I can, to finish paying for all the stuff that I basically paid for out of pocket to get this thing going, and then to have a little left over to pay the bills. Pay the bills and maybe buy some socks. I think we have like 3 pairs of socks in my house, and it'd be nice. It'd be nice to have some socks. So anyways, if you're getting some value out of this and you'd like it to carry on and you'd like other people to be able to get it for free, please do chip in whatever you can. Links are down below for donating to the channel. It only survives because of donations, and I do this about 80 hours a week at the moment. I may scale it back at some point to 60 or 70, but I'm putting in more than enough time into it, I think, and there's no way to have a job on the side and do it at this level, to do it at this amount. So please do chip in so I can carry on doing that. I'd really love to carry on doing it at this level because there's nothing else I want to do other than help you guys with this stuff and help people understand this and lead retreats and help people train in meditation and also do my own practices. You know, if there's enough funds that come in, finally I can go spend some time with some of my teachers and things that I haven't gotten to see in years. So, you know, I'd like to be able to do that. And if I do that, I'll be better. If I'm better, I can be better for you guys. So this is part of how the circle of things works, you know. In any case, thank you so much for being here. If you're interested in the body practices of Buddhism or the energetic practice of Buddhism, check out the Lohan Palm course linked down below. Neil Ripsky, awesome dude. Talked about him several times on this channel. I'm going to keep talking about him for the next couple of months because he's awesome. And right now, it's still half off for the first 50 people who join the course before we get launched. I think there's maybe, I don't know, probably at this point, 25 or so spots left where that'll be half off for 3 months. So if you have any interest in the body practices that aid in meditation or the energetic practices that aid in meditation, sign up for the pre-launch list and I'll send you one of those coupons when we get going. Should be in the next, I don't know, 5 days, 7 days tops to get launched. So this thing is coming off the ground real soon. If you want to join my community of more serious meditators, all of the materials I have on that are available for free already on YouTube. You can head down that road if you want, but I'm also building a community on Skool, Skool. That's down below in the comments as well, or in the comments and the description as well. And when that is built, my friends, when there's 100 people in that group, then we can start sending people on long retreat. This is my big vision. If you want to do a month of retreat and your bills are $2,000 a month, let's say your bills plus the cost of the retreat and travel and all this, let's say it's going to cost you $2,000. For most people, that makes long-term retreat impossible, doesn't it? If there's 100 of us and we all love you and care about you and want you to be able to do long-term retreat, we can all chip in $20. And if we chip in $20, you get to go into retreat for a month without, you know, all of the rest of your life falling apart. So I'm building a community through Skool who want to support the teachings I'm giving now, want to train in the techniques that I teach more seriously, want to do more retreat with me, and want to support the whole community of people that are training with me in being able to do long-term retreat, not just with me, but in whatever tradition you're training in. If you're training in Thai forest, great. If you're training in Tantra, great. If you're training in Chan or Zen, great. This community will eventually be able to support its members, probably at least 12, if not 24 of its members a year, going into at least 2 weeks of retreat each. So if that sounds like something you want to get involved in, join the Skool community. And that community is growing. It's awesome. There's other benefits to joining that community, not the least of which is that we all talk to each other and there's a lot more feedback on, you know, on the techniques and things that I teach amongst those people because they're doing them a lot more. Okay, so if you wanted to support me, that's another good way to do it. Other than that, thank you guys and gals and everyone else for being here. And I hope to see you again very soon. Try not to die before I do.